Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the December meeting of the Kentucky Board of Education. We're delighted you're here, and I will ask Dr. Jones to call the roll.
Holly Bloodworth.
Here.
Mike Borchers. Justin Pate.
Here.
Julie Pyle.
Here.
Randy Poe.
Here.
Sharon Porter Robinson.
Here.
Lee Todd.
Here.
Steve Trimble.
Here.
Diane Woods.
Here.
Lou Young.
Here.
Lawrence McCroby.
Here.
Preston Graham.
Here.
Secretary Jamie Link. And President Aaron Thompson.
Here.
Roll call is complete. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Included on today's agenda, as we do each meeting, is a dedicated public comment segment, usually limited to 10 speakers at a maximum of 3. Unfortunately, today we do not have anyone available in person for public comment, nor did we receive any public comment online. We will go ahead and transition then quickly to our good news items, which we are always delighted to share. And Dr. Jones, I don't have a list of who's doing what, so I'll just ask you all to pull out if you are a good news heralder today. If you'll go ahead, we'll start with who has Kentucky's FFA. Caroline Groth.
I do.
Yay, yay.
I do. I'm so excited. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Ma'am.
Sometimes people say I speak very softly. They tell the tale, so I'm sure. Kentucky's FFA's Caroline Groth of the Fayette County Locust Trace chapter was elected at the 2024-25 Eastern Region Vice President of the National FFA organization at the 97th Annual Convention in October. Kentucky FFA was well represented at the convention, which is the largest youth organization gathering in the United States. Attendance this year included 72,000 FFA members, advisors, guests that was held in Indianapolis. Ms. Groth is a student at the University of Kentucky, pursuing a double major in agricultural education and agricultural economics. She will take a year off from her studies to fulfill the duties of her office, which include but are not limited to traveling more than 100,000 miles with her 5 teammates to serve more than 1 million members of the national organization. Serve as an ambassador for the national FFA and the agriculture industry, meeting with agriculture leaders, business leaders, and government officials. More information about the many Kentucky FFA winners is available on Kentucky Teacher. Congratulations, Ms. Caroline Groth, elected 24-25 as Eastern Region Vice President of the National FFA. And when you get a chance, go to that website, because FFA is not what it was back in the day,
Listen,
Randy.
not your granddaddy's FFA, that's for sure.
Certainly has evolved.
Yeah, Locust Trace is an amazing school too. So.
And go visit Locust Trace. They'd love to see you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Appreciate it. And go teach Kentucky.
That's me.
You ready?
It is indeed a pleasure. The Kentucky Department of Education has named a new class of ambassadors for the Go Teach initiative. The mission of Go Teach Kentucky is to ensure that all students across the Commonwealth have equitable access to effective educators. Go Teach Kentucky seeks to recruit the next generation of teachers in Kentucky, helping remedy the critical shortage that affects every state in the United States. Ambassadors in the Go Teacher initiative have 3 main goals. 1, communicate with and inspire students in high school and college to consider teaching as a career. Communicate with potential and current teachers to promote rewards and opportunities associated with careers in teaching. Support and promote the central focus areas, programs of organizations of Go Teach Kentucky, such as Educators, Rising Kentucky, and Teaching and Learning Career Pathway. Ambassadors were selected from a pool of applicants from across the state. The 2025 Go Teacher ambassadors are Jennifer Brown, Menifee County, Natalie Canisell from Fayette County, Brooke Kaufman, Shelby County, Haley Dent from Boone County, Jessica Dawn Thrasher, Wayne County, Zach Fisher, Jefferson County, Preston Graves, Simpson County, Michelle Gross, Spencer County, Melissa Hall, Breathitt County, Amber Hinkie, Bell County, Madeline Janelle Morgan, Williamstown Independent, Allison King, Paintsville Independent, Rachel Maxwell, Scott County, Sadie Rice, Fayette County, Ryan Scott Johnson, Barron County, Ashley Smith, Jefferson County, Alicia Thomas, Fayette County, Penny Thomas, Boyd County, Sarah Wallace, Anderson County, Sarah Webster, Boone County, and Crystal Williams from Warren County. We need to give them a little bit of applause here, I think, as a group for the work that they do, because this is just not announcing them, but they're going to be working tirelessly this whole year. So they deserve a little bit.
Yeah.
Great job for those individuals.
You did a great job, Dr. Poe. We conspired to give you the list of the long, hard names. I just think it's fun to watch.
Yeah, thank you.
You did a great job.
I had to stay up
you.
last night pronouncing some.
And thanks so much
Needed
to
my
our
help back here for-
ambassadors. Like Dr. Poe said, these folks are going to be out there drumming up support for the pool of future educators in Kentucky. So thank you. Family Partnership Council.
So that is mine.
Thanks, Ms. Pyle.
Says during its 2023 term, Family Partnership Council, FPC, also known as one of our acronym members, conducted an in-depth analysis of the latest research on family partnerships and collaborated to create the Family Partnership Council's recommendations to the Kentucky Department of Education. As part of the recommendations, KDE is seeking to highlight districts and schools that are doing family partnerships well and what they're doing with a special focus on innovative practices. The department has already received several submissions, and Faust Elementary shared a successful story of promising practice named Homework Diner, which this is pretty cool. The Homework Diner series is aimed at building relationships with families around a good meal, sharing a meal, while providing them with the necessary tools and assistance to help their students with their homework. Community partners take turns providing each meal. It has been a great vehicle to connect the school, families, and communities around a great meal. Multiple community partners have already requested to be involved, and sometimes that's the hardest part, is to get the community and partners. KDE has encouraged all Kentucky districts and schools to utilize the success stories of effective partnership with families forum to share their stories to creating trusting relationships with families as partners that are making a positive impact for both students and families. Stories will be shared as a resource and inspiration to other schools across the Commonwealth as we seek innovative and successful ways to partner with our parents, families, and communities. And I believe you can access the Family Partnership Council website, and the form is on that website. And I encourage schools, if you see a story that inspires you, reach out to that school and find out what they did and use that as an inspiration to recreate that in your community.
Thank you so much. That one was right up your alley.
It
Judy.
sure was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I just looked it up. Faust Elementary is in Owensboro. I don't know if it's in Owensboro Independent or Davis County, but that sounds like such a great program. I love that. Breaking bread together and learning with your children is kind of one of the most lovely early childhood experiences I think any of us could enjoy. So excellent. Thank you. We also have a recognition from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Madam Chair, that's me.
Thank you.
Talking about ways to highlight interfacing with our business and industry community. This is a wonderful recognition. The U.S. Department of Labor recognizes the Kentucky Department of Education for its commitment to apprenticeships. The Kentucky Department of Education's Office of Career and Technical Education received an Apprenticeship Ambassador Certificate of Recognition from the U.S. Department of Labor at a White House ceremony on October 23rd. KDE was the only entity from Kentucky and the only state Department of Education to receive this recognition. Yeah. Mary Taylor, industry training and development specialist from KDE's Division of Technical Schools and Federal Programs, accepted the award, recognizing KDE for its commitment to expand and diversify registered apprenticeship programs. Apprenticeship ambassadors are helping to modernize registered apprenticeships by making specific commitments to sponsor promotional and training activities, conduct outreach to people from underrepresented populations, launch registered apprenticeship programs, and most importantly, to hire apprentices. To date, these organizations have held more than 10,800 promotional and outreach activities and 2,600 training sessions, established 520 registered apprenticeship programs, and hired more than 155,000 apprentices. I'm pretty sure that's nationwide, but
Yeah.
we have participated. Approximately 90% of ambassadors offer programming geared toward underrepresented groups.
Excellent. Again, nice match. I think you did a great job with that. And so Dr. Hargis and her team continue to knock it out of the park on CTE work across Kentucky. Appreciate it so much. So if I were a gambling woman on Kentucky and Literacy Award, I would bet the next one is Miss Bloodworth.
You are right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things. So Kentucky has been awarded a $55 million federal grant to advance statewide literacy outcomes. The Kentucky Department of Ed was awarded a 5-year, $55 million comprehensive literacy state development grant from the U.S. Department of Education. The funding will be used to advance literacy skills for preschool through grade 12, with an emphasis on disadvantaged children, including children living in poverty, English learners, and children with disabilities. The grant program, renamed Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy 2025, will provide competitive funding to districts to strengthen high-quality instructional resources and curriculum-based professional learning for all levels. KDE anticipates funding approximately 40 districts.
Okay.
All public school districts and state schools can apply, and no matching funds are required. So this is so exciting because we've got so much momentum and so much good work happening in literacy.
Yeah.
And this just feels like the way to be able to continue that.
I agree. It feels like a real synthesis. So this one is
Mhm.
Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy 2025. So
That's right.
more good literacy work happening in Kentucky. Excellent. Thank you. And congratulations to the grant writers on that one. It's brought in a big haul for the state. Thank you. All right. Always love the good news time, but also love transitioning into the next item around board member sharing. I am going to, but let me read the real part. Per board policy, the agenda for each regular meeting does include an item under which board members may raise issues not included on the agenda for the purposes of clarification, referral to a committee, or scheduling for future board review and or action if such is the consensus of the board. You can, in addition to raising those issues and concerns, we have over the past several years devoted this time for you to share about any work that you're doing out in the field, any professional learning opportunities that you've had, and other professional activities related to your board service. So I'm going to call on Ms. Pyle this morning, who picked up for our dear friend Patrice to take over the work of the whole child, whole school, whole community task force. And you all met yesterday.
We did. We met yesterday. Yeah. We had a number of new members, so we spent quite a bit of time just introducing ourselves, giving somewhat of our
Okay, good.
background. And then we had a presentation from Fayette County and the work that
Oh,
they're
good.
doing there, which is incredible. I think,
Miranda Scully by chance. Yeah.
yeah, so it was just they have they have a steering committee now that they've gotten together with all the stakeholders, all different levels, just doing a lot of great work there. And then so there was a lot of discussion about sharing about resources that are going on across the state, which is a big benefit of that group because you have many different stakeholders there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for picking up that service. Is Jim Tackett still the person
Jim
from
Tackett
KBE?
still, yeah.
So yeah, Patrice has kept us abreast of that over the years, and it sounds like that work aligns so perfectly with the vision and mission of this board. And so really appreciate you picking that up.
Yeah.
And again, perfect spot for you.
Well, and Dr. McCroby is on
Oh
that
yeah.
committee also.
Okay, good. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Excellent. So we're allowed to have 2 reps? Or
Well,
you
we do.
represent JCPS? Okay, good. I didn't know if you were doing it for JCPS or for us. Okay. Anything you'd like to add about your first meeting?
No, I think that they hit it, Julie hit it nail on the head there. There's just a lot of resources out there and everyone's willing
Yeah.
to step in and help out when possible in
Yeah.
order to ensure the success of our students across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I love it. And
Yeah.
the intentionality around the cross-agency work, I think, is really important there as well.
I think one thing that was interesting that they brought up, because this had started prior to COVID, that our state was kind of on the forefront when COVID happened because
Oh,
we already had those interagency relationships built
Mhm.
and connections
Yeah.
that we were able to kind of tackle and get up to speed and get things running with those relationships that had already been built.
Yeah. Yeah, we lament silos in our work all the time. So to see something like that really flattens that out and spreads it across Kentucky gives me a lot of hope and optimism. So again, thank you for your service. And you meet quarterly?
I think 6 times a year.
6. Okay. All right. So maybe right in advance of each board meeting.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
all
the
right,
plan.
Tuesday
excellent.
right before.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. Oh, thank you again for your service. Appreciate that. Other board members that would like to share, Mr. Trimble.
Yeah, I was able to go to and visit Porter Elementary on October the 18th in Johnson County to see the Leader in Me Leadership Day.
Oh, nice. Oh, I wanted to go. I was invited.
Well, Randy Poe was there, Mike Borchers was there, so it was
Oh.
well represented as a board that was there, and
That's a trinity.
yeah, that's right. That's a tough. They
Just
accept
saying.
us anyway.
Maybe a good
so-
thing you missed. Luke.
I'll just say it's a good thing we had Steve there.
I kept both these guys under control the whole time.
I was so impressed. I
It was.
told our representatives that we had our house chair there and so forth, and I reminded them, and it was just at the same time that test scores were coming out, and I said,
Right.
we forget about, we look at these test scores and they're just, they don't tell what our kids do. And as the house chair was there, here in Frankfurt, we forget about what's taking place in Johnson
Yeah.
and these
Yeah.
other places and this great work. Those kids were so awesome. I mean, I was
Miss
just
Lamaster
so
was the
impressed.
principal there, and she does an awesome job. And there was a wax museum, which was unbelievable. Wasn't
Yes.
it? Had each kid picked up a person in history and
Yeah.
Oh,
pushed a
fun.
button, and they explained they were dressed up like them and had stuff around them, and it was really neat. And so now Mr. Cochran, the superintendent there at Johnson County, has implemented that in all the schools in Johnson County. It's a really good program for leadership, communication, confidence. They bring community partners in. It kind of checks all the boxes. United We Learn in there, and it's just a really good program. Mr. Lamaster does a great job. Mr. Cochran does a great
We
job.
talked yesterday, Commissioner, you mentioned about chronic absenteeism. There's not chronic absenteeism there because the students have their different leadership. If a student is absent, another student calls them, asks them how they're doing, why they're not here, can they get here, and all the other things. And it was impressive, the presentations that these individual students did, and just great things that's occurring. And it's just outstanding. They chart their little goals and where they're going to
Yeah.
be. It reminded me of our trip to Finland, where students were engaged in the educational process of knowing exactly where they are
Ownership.
in line, and the student voice with the parents, where they have student-led conferences. It's just a model of some excellence.
Yeah.
Model of excellence.
I really appreciate, Steve, that you made the connection to Kentucky United We Learn. We talked in committee yesterday about what vibrant learning looks like. And I know Tom Cochran and the team in Johnson, as they've done their L3 work, have said, let's look at leadership. Let's look at a portrait of a learner in action in our school district, where every kid is an agent for themselves and owns their own learning. And I was really proud that Superintendent Cochran reached out to so many people to say, come see this. We've got to tell those stories.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we talk about defining vibrant learning for the kindergarten, our elementary students and our middle school students,
Yeah.
student-led conferences is an excellent way
100%.
to have that vibrant learning for how a student takes ownership of their learning and then talks with their parents and with other big people around them. That is vibrant learning. So just
And it's also an example of local accountability too, of what they did and how they did it as a particular model
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
so forth. So very impressive. And I reminded people like Steve, how diverse our state is. I could have been to Cleveland quicker than I can get to Johnson, Cleveland, Ohio. I was sitting there saying, it was great. It was a great trip down, but it
beautiful
also
there.
shows how the width of our state of
Yeah.
traveling. So as
Oh, yeah.
commissioner, I know how many miles you have to go but you have to see the different things from Paducah to Pikeville, as we always say,
Don't
but
speed.
Fulton County all the way over. It's crazy.
ouch.
Excellent, thank you. Other board members to share.
Yep, I just wanted to jump
Yes.
in and share. I always like to be the champion of the arts of what's going in the
Yeah.
arts. In early November, we had 16 of our Kentucky high school marching bands attend a Grand National Championship event in
Yeah.
Indianapolis, Indiana. And I got the fortunate pleasure of being there with all 16 of the directors as their students performed. We had a little over 1,400 students that performed, coming from Anderson County, Bourbon County, Boyle County, Campbell County, Christian Academy of Louisville, Dixie Heights there in Kenton County, Garrett County, or John Hardin from Hardin County, Meade County, Murray from Murray Independent, Nicholas County, Owen County, Pulaski County, Simon Kenton from Kenton County, Oldham County, South Oldham High School there in Oldham, and Valley High School from Jeffersonville.
Nice.
And it's interesting to note that out of these 1,300 students, 130 of them were named a national champion. And it was great to know that in the 48 years of this competition, 20 times has Kentucky brought home the national championship.
Wow.
And only 5 bands have claimed that. So Bourbon County, Adair County, Beechwood, Elizabethtown, and Murray, Kentucky. So it's very exciting to see what these students do. And then it was the first time that a Kentucky school has won the U.S. Army Award, and it was its inaugural year from Valley High School. So I'm very happy that I got to lead that, to be the one. But there's a lot of great things happening in our music instruction here, which ties together a lot of the initiatives that we as a board are talking about with Vibrant Learning, United We Learn. And those are just flagship programs that Kentucky should be proud of, especially on the national stage, that we can be proud that almost half of those national championships have resided here in Kentucky. And there's 49 other states just, waiting to say, hey, what is Kentucky doing that they're able to capture that many times? So very proud of my colleagues, very proud of the work of all of us serving and supporting the schools
Well,
of
thank
Kentucky.
you. I don't know about that competition. I'm so used to, hearing about Lafayette and Dunbar in my area.
Here
So
in
do they
Indiana.
target smaller school districts?
They
or-
don't necessarily target it. It's if you want to present yourself on that national stage
Yeah.
to be critically seen by
yeah.
people clear across the state, the country. And it's also a financial aspect. Many of our programs just simply are not
Yeah.
afforded the financial support.
You
and
can't go
it's-
to Macy's every year.
Yeah, it's hard to ask the students to fund that. So, several of these schools work for years in order to go once, and they have that one shot. And of course, every 4 years is a new cycle of
Yeah.
kids because we
Yeah,
graduate, God willing, all of them. So
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really interesting. And continue to be the beacon for arts education for us, Dr. McCroby.
I have
Yes, Dr.
another
Poe.
good news item. I had the pleasure of being invited. A Beechwood Edge program is another great example of an L3 work in career pathways and going from just college to college and career pathways. And they had they hosted several schools from different parts of the country there, and excellent program. And I commend Beechwood for their transformational change over the years from just saying, okay, here's college, but how do we in this independent school district have a focus on careers that are just as important, that it's not just going to a 4-year college, but what's the career pathway focus within that 4-year college? And they do an excellent job in presenting. And if you ever get a chance, you need to go up and visit. Excellent program. So once again, having people from other states coming in to see your program is telling you that it's some excellence again.
Mhm.
We got to continue to point out our excellence, just like you did there, because we got a lot of excellent things going on.
I wouldn't mind
Yes, Dr. King.
piggybacking on that one. More of a statewide good news and reminder.
Yeah.
Is the Work Ready Kentucky Scholarship Program.
Yeah.
We've got to continue pushing that out, which basically provides tuition for any Kentucky resident who does not have a degree, which is practically all of the students graduating this upcoming year, who are going into high demand fields such as manufacturing, healthcare, business, IT, transportation. Commonwealth will provide last dollar in scholarship assistance after financial aid to cover that tuition. One thing I think we've got to continue to consider is One of the responsibilities I feel being a board member is teacher recruitment, teacher education, particularly recruitment into those pathways that lead to that. Education is not
On
an
the list.
approved Work Ready Kentucky scholarship program. They typically lean more toward the high wage fields. However, Human Services has recently entered into the approved list because of the necessity for counselors and, social workers, that kind of thing. I think it's a really good time to talk about education being a critical need in Kentucky. I think it's a good time to think about that. That's not necessarily on our legislative agenda, but it's not a bad thing to mention going into this session. Unfortunately, it's a twofold request because the money is already running out in the Work Ready
Right.
Scholarship Program. So there would have to be an increase in funding before we could increase eligible programs. But it would be a tremendous recruitment tool to help keep local talent local in our school districts. If that's just yet another carrot that we would have to say, hey, enter into the 2-year pathway of education and you'll have 2 years paid for.
Yeah, I love that so much, Dr. Pate. I was just on their website not too long ago. If you just look at Kentucky Work Ready, workreadykentucky.com, the list of eligible programs is really long, but you can't Google anything under education. So if we think about this 2 years in an education pathway and then other options for instructional assistants and others who can then leverage one of the EPSB alternative routes to certification, I think we would have a powerful tool at our disposal. And thinking about the myriad different jobs that people can do in education, it doesn't have to just be a teacher prep pathway. So I think that's really smart. And I'm hoping Dr. Thompson is taking really good notes. He'll have a chance to rebut here in just a second. But yeah, I love that idea. Thank you. And this is over and above dual credit scholarships and other opportunities that we have. So one of the things Brian often talks to us about is how we can find ways to find efficiencies in all of these different programs that are going on. So I think that's really smart too. Thank you.
I have one.
Yes, Ms. Wood.
Okay, and this is basically what's very good news for me and my family. I want to show my appreciation and special thanks to Chief Academic Officer in the Division of Teaching and Learning, Mickey Ray, and the science consultants, Erica Baker and Amanda Pruitt in the Division of Academic Program Standards, and of course to my colleague there, Dr. Lou Young. But I was at home on Sunday afternoon sitting there minding my own business, and my nephew calls me, says, I'm trying to put together this science unit, and I need my supplemental resources that are in the information that they have are just not working. And I just need something that's more vibrant, that's going to get the kids more excited. What the supplemental resources are basically a repeat of what we've already talked about. So I text Lou. I said, well, let me just send her a text. She'll respond tomorrow. Well, immediately she had responded with the Kentucky Science Standards, which I was able to share. And then she was telling me about the support at the State Department level, which is one of the resources that I know that I did not use as well as I should have when I was school superintendent, nor teaching, nor school principal. And I just want to read you this dialogue that happened that morning. And I said, okay, I'll do that, thinking that they'll respond in a couple of days and let us know. So that at 7:50, I sent an email to Chief Academic Officer in the Division of Teaching and Learning, Mickey Ray. Good morning. I'm reaching out to you on behalf of my nephew, and I won't call his name, who is a fourth grade science teacher in Blank County. He is teaching a unit on vision and light and seeking supplemental resources. He says he's went through the unit and he just cannot find anything that he feels is just going to be the icing on the cake for his kids. He's looking for print resources as well as names of schools in the state who might be willing to share their resources and successes. And I said, would you share with me the person at KBE who might be able to help him? Thank you for your support. And this was at 7:50 a.m. At 8:33, I had a response from the Chief Academic Officer. Good morning, Ms. Woods. I'm happy to help. I'm including Erica Baker and Amanda Pruitt, science consultants in the Division of Program Standards, here to support your nephew. Thank you for reaching out to us on his behalf. At 11:49, I have an email from science consultant Erica Baker and Amanda Thank you for reaching out regarding. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for reaching out regarding support for grade 4 science. Amanda and I are currently working on a response to assist blank his name with resources for the unit on vision and light. We are researching high quality materials that can best support your nephew in meeting the Kentucky academic standards for science. We look forward to getting back to you this afternoon with resources for your consideration. Thank you for your patience and support. And all this was done in the dialogue the morning. By that evening, my nephew, Chad, I was supposed to say his name, I guess. Anyway, Chad had what he needed and he was excited for what the department was able to do. And he said, I never even thought about contacting them.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway. You mentioned it when you were superintendent that sometimes we don't access the treasure trove of resources that are available at the department. And just when I got your text, I went on and found a lot of units and information that I didn't even realize was there. So number one takeaway, we should all have an Aunt Diane.
Don't call me on Sunday.
Takeaway, I honestly believe, and my own experiences have borne out that that anybody in Kentucky, any educator in Kentucky would have gotten that same level of service from the team. So I know that's something that you're stressing in terms of the responsiveness on behalf of the department. And so to meet the needs of a early career teacher in that speedy way, I think is really exemplary.
And he has taught for 8 years. He's not an early.
Yeah, I thought you told me 7, but yeah, that still feels early to me, Diane. I'm telling you.
And wants to teach. I have encouraged him to go into administration, yada, yada. And he says, no, I just want to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Find people who are content in the classroom. Amazing. Dr.
Thank you.
Fletcher, thank you.
I do want to tag on to what Board Member Woods said. I'm very proud of the team that we have here at KDE. One of the things that we've focused on as a part of our strategic plan is to make sure that we're a service organization. And as part of that, we're doing a pulse check on every email that's sent out from the board, from the KDE members, and essentially ask a couple of questions. Were your needs met? And essentially, were you satisfied, and which group did you work with? Early on, our data shows that well over 90% of people that have responded with us have been very pleased with the service that they're getting. And again, every single person. Now, we're not asking if you agree with our decisions. We're saying, was your needs served? And so far that data has been very positive. And again, that goes back to the hard work of the department here. And I want to say thank you to the team here at the department for that.
I appreciate your renewed interest in data related to good customer service. I know that was one of Commissioner Holliday's kind of hallmark efforts when he was commissioner. So I think it was a very timely revival of that focus. So thank you.
And Lou, I'd say just as somebody that works with pre-service teachers,
yeah,
I use materials and resources all the time
from the department.
You know, like just lately, the interdisciplinary literacy practices videos that are brand new. I mean, they've been amazing to help pre-service teachers really see things in action that we're talking about in class.
I love that. And a new resource just popped up this week. If you all didn't, I think we all received it in our email about articulating high quality exceptional resources and Kentucky United We Learn. Yay. So deeper learning, what that looks like. So I know that the team is out there diligently creating and disseminating new content. So I really appreciate, Diane, the plug that these resources are free and at the disposal of educators across the Commonwealth. And we are just a little bit over time. I just want to close with a note about the National Association of State Boards of Education annual conference. As you all know, was in Kentucky. We were the host state for 2024 in late October. We had a really good representation across the board. Dr. Robinson presented, I presented, Dr. Fletcher was a keynote. Todd, our own Todd Allen, received a prestigious annual award from NCOSIA, affiliate organization with NASB. There was a press release on that as well. Todd leads the nation in the work of state boards of education attorneys and was very appropriately receiving that award. So we were happy to be there to cheer him on as well. So it was a great event, a lot of very positive spotlights on Kentucky.
The students.
I'm sorry?
The students that sang.
Oh, right. We also had 2 student performances, one a trio from Woodford County High School your peeps, Preston, were amazing. They sang the national anthem on the opening day and then did a follow-up number, and they were just awesome. I've got a picture that I texted to Superintendent Adkins. I'll show you later. And then Not a Dry Eye when the gifted and talented choir from the Kentucky School for the Blind sang on the second day of the conference. Phenomenal. I'll never forget
Yes.
that performance. It was just
And I had to speak
so
after
fun.
that.
Yeah, and then Rob got the spot. I'll follow the most beautiful kids in the world. And he knocked it out of the park, though. So it was a really good spotlight. The weather was beautiful. Kentucky hospitality was in full bloom at that event. So thanks for the support from the board for those of us who were able to attend. And our ongoing work and relationship with NASB has been certainly beneficial to us. All right, thank you so much, everyone. At this time, unless I've turned to the wrong page, we have a report from the president of the Council for Post-Secondary Education, Dr. Aaron Thompson.
Madam Chair, thank you. Good morning, board. It's good to be with you. Lots of stuff going on in my world, but I have to address what I was called out earlier to address. Representative Tipton and I now for several years have tried to figure out a way to get education into that work-ready scholarship. It is not over yet, by the way. We were able to get closer, Dr. Pate, as you all know, but it's not over and done because education, especially recruiting our teachers, truly we have identified as one of our biggest employee gaps. So I've been working on it for years. We're going to continue working on it. Hopefully we'll get it done. But that's the first thing. Second thing is proud to announce that for the second year in a row, you probably knew that Kentucky, if not the first state, was one of the first states in higher ed to bounce back in enrollment from COVID. We're proud of that. Last year, we set some records in increasing. We were dependent on the groups that came out to say something about that. We were either number 1 or number 4, you choose, in the nation in increase. This year, it looks the same. We've had another really decent record increase all across the board, actually, which is good, both in our community and technical colleges and our four-year institutions. Once again, our underrepresented populations was the highest demographic to increase as it has been the last 6 or 7 years when no other increase was there. Still have a long way to go. We're going to keep getting there because for us to reach our 60 by 30 mark, we'll have to get a lot more people in the pipeline, which some good news again, this is the first year in 10 years that we saw an uptick in college going from K-12. We are going to continue working on that, obviously with you, to try to get more of our young people engaged in the value of a college credential. Once again, it doesn't have to be a 4-year credential. It could be a technical credential, a workforce credential, but something that shows that by 2030, at least 62% of our population will have to have an entry-level credential to get a job. 90% will have to have one to get promoted. So we are going to keep working toward that end. Some other items that we've recognized for a while at the council is that we are getting a dearth of leadership going into administration and higher education. So 6 years ago, we started a leadership group, the academic leadership group, working with our underrepresented populations for a year, giving them all kinds of what we call upskilling in leadership to help them to be prepared to go into leadership positions. We're proud to say that many of those folk we've worked with over the last 6 years have done exactly that. We just finished that cohort this year. But we also started another called academic, I want to make sure I get my name right here. We start these things, then they give me an acronym that I can never remember. We started our Faculty Leadership Academy, which really works with our what we call mid-career faculty all across the board to get them ready to go into a level of administration where they can be successful. We started with 24, and this is going to go on for the next year, and we'll continue doing this over and over again till we can fill that dearth that we have in higher education and leadership. Also proud to announce that the Graduate Profile Academy, we've come a long way, as you all know. We've been able to identify those skills. We've been able to start incorporating those in our community and technical colleges, as well as our four-year institutions. Now we're at a point of assessment. So we're working with groups to start assessing those faculty and staff, as well as some outside folk that are helping us. So we're going to have this really in full swing before too long. We also are starting to look at implementing this in general education, because what we know that in the past, general education has been considered those 2 years you get rid of to get to the good stuff. But all employers are telling us, well, they don't have the skills that we need, even if they have the technical skills. So we're now looking at this, how general education is an important element. It's not general, really. It's a set of essential competencies that now we're able to identify, incorporate, and put into general education courses, as well as all of our courses, but especially those that will help that major actually have some zing, that they can be fully employable with all those skills that they need to have employed. Now, one of those will be civic, one of those is civic education and democracy. So we've identified that as essential as a part of what we need to do with all of our students coming out. Kentucky, I'm proud to say, will probably be the first state to start measuring quality education through this means. So I'm proud of that. We also, with our Gear Up program and our Kentucky Academy, Advising Academy, I'll get it out sooner or later, we have so many of our young folk who are seniors in your schools that now have gotten acceptance letters to college, and we've started this campaign whereby they are reading their acceptance letters over video, and we're shipping those out all across the state and all across the nation to let all these young people know that they have the opportunity to go to college, and in fact, colleges and universities want them. A couple other points, and I have to take questions after this. I think it is truly important that once again we look at, as we start thinking about what's coming up and the needs that we have in the state, start thinking about how we even collaborate more. With that, the commissioner had a chance to meet with our presidents, and they had a chance to talk with the commissioner and say, how can we work even closer together to get where we need to go? And we're going to continue that conversation to a point to where hopefully if there's any glitches we can work through, but if there's opportunities, and that's why we're identifying them, we can actually make those and do it as partnership. Speaking of partnership, with Kentucky Cabinet of Human and Family Services, along with my unit and with KCTCS, we started what we call Climb Health, and that's helping those that had been deep in substance abuse, may have a record based on it, to be able to get a college credential that they can actually apply to become a support service personnel to those that are in substance abuse now. I got a chance to go to Big Sandy Community and Technical College and give out a lot of those certificates to those folk who are getting engaged and hearing their stories. If you haven't heard them, you should. I mean, you know, talking about this was not just an opportunity, this was a lifeline. This was an ability to actually get out of where they were and into something where they need to go and where they want to go. So these are the kinds of partnerships that we hope to continue to develop between higher education and our workforce, higher education and all of our cabinets, higher education, the legislature, and obviously K-12, to make sure that we're doing for Kentucky what Kentucky needs done. So there's a lot of good information here. I should also say our dual credit, Dr. Poe, is up again. And we're working strongly with some identification of how we can even make sure that these students are going into a pipeline, going into a pathway that matters to them and help identify that. We're going to be working strongly on that 5% we call the brain drain that leave us to go out of state to other colleges, that we're going to try to help them to remain in state. So we're working with our private and public institutions and many of those young folk who are in these programs to recognize that they have some opportunities here whereby they can stay here. That doesn't mean we capture them all, but it means that if we work in this area, we can capture more. With that, Madam Chair, happy to take any questions that you or the board may have. But that's my report.
Dr. Thompson, thank you so much. Your reports are always riveting. Today's was particularly exciting. Portrait of a Graduate work at higher ed in Kentucky is leading the nation. You mentioned that Kentucky may be the first to measure Portrait of a Graduate attainment. I even wonder how many other states are in the profile of a graduate at post-secondary at all. I know when we talk to P12 leaders across the state, we always let them know that higher ed is our partner in this and that we are looking for seamlessness from P12 into post-secondary when it comes to these, to a robust set of competencies that will be needed across Kentucky for a skilled workforce. So do you know about other states that are doing profile of a graduate?
Not even close to this level. We know of people that are starting because we're helping them to start.
Yeah.
But no. And the other thing too, I think is important to say, and you're hitting on it, is that we are connecting this in a very meaningful way from early childhood through graduation and into the workforce. Right. And that's important, right? That's why I love the Ed Continuum and what we're doing there. But the other point too is we're not just starting to measure the outputs, we're measuring the inputs. We're making sure that pedagogy, curriculum, and all of that's incorporated within the threads, that it's not just something you add on with the test later on, that you're really measuring formative learning, indeed, with summative output. So all of these things, these are multiple items to deep learning that I don't think any states come close to even thinking about how to do it beyond what we're doing in Kentucky. And I mean, this is why, and once again, I'm gonna brag a little bit, this is why our P20 was just judged as #1 in the nation again. I mean, because we're doing those sorts of things that are innovative. And I just don't know if everybody in this state knows what we're doing in Kentucky. I actually believe people outside the state and other states know very well because they keep calling us. But the idea that we're doing this at such a substantive level and really able to start measuring, in a very empirical way is important.
Yeah, I know my undergraduate colleagues at the University of Kentucky are absolutely aligning around the work of the profile. And that's something we ought to think about taking to the State Chamber of Commerce and other places. That message, the P20 message through that competency approach, I think is an important one. Dr. Poe.
Yeah, I always love the opportunity to question the great mind of Dr. Thompson there. But, do you see or I see, but I'm asking you, your interpretation of this. I see an increase in the enrollment in post-secondary, both in the four-year colleges and the Kentucky, the KCCTS. And do you have the numbers on the linking potentially because of our increase in the dual credit? Number of students, how many that are taking dual credit that are then going on. I know when you did your town halls the other year, you presented that underrepresented population increases in areas. Is there an opportunity, for your statistics department to get that data, for us so we can see the link between that and so that we continue, as part of that Kentucky continuum, is pushing K-12 and breaking down that 12 and 13 and 14 years, I think is showing tremendous value to our Commonwealth. And I think that's a message, as you said, I'm not sure our legislature understands the link between those and how that's going to help us reach that 2030 goal. And without that, and without looking at that, because I know KCCTS and the money that we pay for a credit. I know from it's saying we got to look at that in order to continue to sustain this model. There has to be a little bit of increase so that they're not losing money with dual credit also, because I think that's some of our pushback or limitations that we're seeing, that we've now increased dual enrollment so well in Northern Kentucky, for example, that there's not enough slots for dual credit almost any longer.
First of all,
Makes sense, the question.
Yeah, you asked several good questions there, and I'll start answering them all one by one. I'll do it fairly fast, Madam Chair. I know you want me to. One is absolutely we can get you that data. Well, not only can we give you the data that shows of the students going in, we can show you their success in college once they get there. And as you've heard me already give in reports, we are showing that students who take dual credit that goes in college, they tend to actually outperform and stay in college longer. I mean, until graduation, not more than long. As a matter of fact, we've cut down our 4-year degrees out of 4-year degree again, by the way. The other point, too, I think you raised is truly crucial here. And that is that it's not just affordability, but it's also the importance that we're seeing that students believe that they can do college. They believe they belong in college. So we've seen with our underrepresented populations a higher output than with other populations in that particular area when they have dual credit. So there's some other value there that goes even beyond what we think about fairly often. They can get through college faster or get a credential while they're in high school. The interesting, we need to actually make sure we solidify that half KCTCS tuition to dual credit, and hopefully we could even get it increased because it saves the state tons of money. But some other points that you make, I think, is important. It behooves us in K-12 and higher ed to work together to do better curricular alignment. So when we're asking for dual credit, we need to be saying, how does this really get into a pipeline, a pathway toward a degree? And that's the other thing we're called to do, because that will make it even more substantive and make it even more important to the student and to the state.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I had one other thing to say, and I forgot. We were called to do Senate joint resolutions. We've had several. KCTCS has one where they're looking at how they can be more efficient and effective as a community and technical college system. That report has been turned in. You're probably going to read and hear a lot about it. CPE had a couple we had to do. One was to look at a business model for taking a hazard community and technical college into a 4-year institution, and we've turned that in, and that was working with Ernst & Young. We have one with Deloitte that looks at whether or not we should have a vet school at Murray State, whether we should have a DO school at Eastern Kentucky University, and whether we should start allowing our public institution, comprehensive institutions to have PhDs. All of that report now has been turned into the legislature. I will be going hobbling, by the way, with my new knee, into the legislature to testify on that on December 10th. So those are reports that I would argue that you all need to take a really close look at, because some of it may affect you. So that's the other thing I would tell you about.
Is that the interim joint session? Okay.
Yes.
I saw that agenda. Thank you so much. Dr. Pate.
Yeah, real quick, there's one thing that I wanted to highlight, kind of in piggybacking where Dr. Poe left off with talking about the alignment and all that. The other thing that I really want to brag on Dr. Thompson and CPE as providing leadership in this area, and something I think we all always need to keep in mind is, it's not just about getting that credential. There's a so what after that credential, so we get them a diploma, so we get them a certificate, a degree, so what? So there's a couple of other initiatives with some program alignment tools that are coming out from some of our data agencies, credentials of value work that's being done, because a lot of time what happens at colleges is we'll look at enrollment as the measure of program health, but just because the program's full doesn't mean that those graduates are getting jobs in our communities with that. So it's not just about getting the pathway from dual credit up to degree attainment. It's also that next step of so what with that degree to make sure that we are feeding into a vibrant Kentucky workforce for what our Kentucky employers need. So
Yeah.
Dr. Thompson, good job on those efforts. I know CPE is really involved in all that work.
We're pushing those hard, as you all know. Thanks Elizabethtown for actually being on the forefront of being our partners to do it.
Measures that matter, friends. Thank you so much. Any further questions for Dr. Thompson? I haven't forgotten you're out there, Dr. Robinson.
It's always good to hear your report, Dr. Thompson, and I do want to commend the comprehensive effort at higher ed orientation to outcomes, and the fact that the way people learn in higher education is very often the way they teach when they come into K-12. And so to see the disciplines and the comprehensive approach to student development in higher ed, including curriculum and pedagogy, is really very encouraging. So I heard you, and I see your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
We see you, Aaron Thompson. The next item on our agenda is afforded to Secretary Link, who was not able to join us today. So I'm happy to turn it over to Commissioner Fletcher for his report.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Young. Before I start with the report, I do want to make one comment about the NASB conference in Louisville.
Oh, yes.
There was an after-hours event at Louisville Slugger that maybe there were two people, with the commissioner and maybe board member Trimble, stepped into the batting cage, and I'm sure it was delivering the ball at like 90 to 95 miles an hour with wooden bats. But I will also say that there was one person hit every ball, and it wasn't the commissioner. So it might not have been 90 miles an hour, but we had a good time, and it was a great opportunity. But too, going back to talking about our students being on showcase, our Kentucky School for the Blind choir, honors choir, did a phenomenal job. As a matter of fact, one of the young ladies often sings the national anthem at Louisville basketball games. And real seriously, I went to CCSSO and in Phoenix recently. I'll talk a little bit about that. And there were people there still talking about that performance. So again, so thankful that we have such wonderful talent at all of our schools across the board in the Commonwealth. That being said, I want to take an opportunity to re-emphasize or to emphasize yesterday's meeting was a perfect example of stakeholder input, especially around accountability, assessment and accountability. If you were able to watch our meeting yesterday, you saw a great example of how we listen to different views. We listen to different, how people approach different parts of assessment and accountability. As a matter of fact, I'd like to applaud Dr. Stafford, our Division Director Stafford, and also Rhonda Sims, our Associate Commissioner, for all the work that they do along with that. But it's also across the department. There's a lot of work that goes into that accountability model from across the department. But keep in mind, we went through 4 prototypes, and each was an iteration. Prototype 1, send it, get input, come back. Prototype 2, prototype 3, prototype 4, and into the point where we're getting, our first framework, which we saw yesterday. And so far, we've already gathered more input from the Kentucky United We Learn Council about that first framework. We've also talked with LSAC. And then yesterday, we got information from the Kentucky Board of Education and their input. And it's always good to see different perspectives and to see what people's thoughts are on different parts and what exactly does vibrant learning mean? How do we define that? And that gets defined in a lot of those meetings as we move along, or better defined, I should say, with a more intricate definition. We have a good starting definition, and it basically centers around relevance, meaningful, useful to the student, but what exactly are examples of that? So very proud of that work. As a matter of fact, too, just to reiterate with the board, the roadshow, or as we've called it, but the town halls that we are having in January, we'll get that information out to you, so you're more than welcome to attend. And also, too, we'll invite our legislators. That way we can see what it looks like. Now, I will say this, there will be a Framework 2.0 before those town halls based on the input that we're gathering. I'll be at the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents winter conference on Sunday and be able to talk to superintendents again. This makes the second summit of sorts that I've attended, and we've talked about accountability with them, and it's been really great work. So again, getting input listening to different viewpoints, making those decisions and moving forward, we've been able to narrow down or narrow to a model I think that most people will feel really good about. I'm excited about because it's really talking about what's important in the classroom. Yes, we are talking about reading. Yes, we're talking about mathematics, and yes, we want to be accountable for those. There's been such a big investment from our legislators. We're so thankful for the investment that they've made into numeracy and literacy, but we owe them a return on investment. And I think the staff here and educators across our Commonwealth are working so diligently with that. But also, too, we want to give districts that opportunity to say, what's important to our local community? What's important to that, whether it be music programs, whether it be advanced science courses, whether it be our portraits to learn and what those competencies look like within. We want people to have that opportunity. So this is an exciting time. This is a very exciting time in education in Kentucky, in my opinion, as we move forward with the accountability model, something that is both useful and meaningful to all. So again, looking forward to more of that as we move along. Also want to thank our board members, Board Member Bloodworth and also Board Member Pate. They emphasized too, I'm going to bring this back out again. Again, almost $55 million in the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant was the largest CLSD grant that Kentucky has received. So I want to emphasize that, but also too emphasize the fact that our state, we're the only state agency and only entity from Kentucky to receive the Apprenticeship Ambassador Certificate of Recognition. Again, some of the great things that are going on here at the department and across the Commonwealth. Also, since my last report, I have visited several school districts, including, and I hate to mention anyone because I don't want to leave people out, but I did have the opportunity to see some vibrant learning, personalized learning in so many. But I do want to mention one in particular at Spencer County Middle School. They have a career exploratory lab at the middle school level where they rotate all of their students in, and they start off with an interest inventory of students, then cater those labs into 10-day work sessions, essentially. So there's some independent learning at the beginning. There's some small projects that they have to do along the way to demonstrate competency. And then there is an exit, if you will, an exit project at the end. For example, students were having to learn how to code in order to program drones. And so the culminating event was they had to show how a drone or program a drone to do a certain task, whether it be go up, straight up, flip in a 360, go out 1 foot, and then land again. So they had to program that. We also saw students that were learning how to tape ankles. They were learning how to tape wrists in case of injuries. They said they watch college football with a whole different view. Yeah. They don't go to the refrigerator when an injury happens. They want to see what exactly is going on. So again, those opportunities are vibrant learning experiences that are personalized for students. And that's going on in so many, those type of activities are going on so much. And it gives me an opportunity to get feedback too from our districts, whether I was in Murray at the beginning of the year and had a great opportunity to visit 4 school districts there, to Spencer and to others. As a matter of fact, I'm going to Floyd County next week and also going to Jefferson County too, visiting some others.
County a couple of weeks ago, and they told me some primary age students had helped you get up off the carpet.
I told them all pictures had to be removed. And I just quickly there, I was on the floor with a group of kindergartners, and I did a great job getting up the first time. And one student cried because he didn't have the opportunity to help me up. So I sat back down, and I couldn't get up. And so the whole class had to help the commissioner off the floor. Yes, that's how the story went. And I told them any evidence had to be destroyed. So I guess now we have video of that now. So, but anyway, that was great, and it's so much fun, and it's the best part of my job. It's the absolute best part of my job to get to see kids in the classrooms interacting, showing those vibrant learning activities that they're interested in, which I'm going to argue is maybe our best tool in the fight against chronic absenteeism. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Also, too, I had the opportunity to attend the Chief State School Officers National Policy Forum in Phoenix. Had the opportunity to network with other state chiefs and also to learn from national leaders on topics such as artificial intelligence, the future of assessment, improving student outcomes in mathematics, and also strategies on teacher recruitment and retention. So there was some great opportunities to learn. one of the ideas there as far as assessment, I saw an idea presented to one of the national testing groups to say, can we give students with artificial intelligence, give students an interest inventory and then quickly cater the assessment based on the interest of that student? So if you're in maybe in a community that is their primary focus is agriculture, then all the mathematics type questions revolve around that. So some great ideas that were coming through that. Artificial intelligence is another that every time I go, it seems like there's something new with artificial intelligence. And by the time we end this meeting, there'll be something new with artificial intelligence. It amazes me as we move through.
I saw AI Jesus on the news this morning. Just saying.
And then too, that's the other thing that we're talking about within the department is trying to teach how do we help our teachers, how do we help our educators and our students to use AI responsibly? Because there's so many parts of AI that to me are scary also too.
That brings up a good point. I know on the post-secondary level, at least I saw from the universities, I guess a framework or recommendation how AI should be utilized within the classroom, either teaching and student-wise. It might be something that, as you're saying, as you're going through that, we should probably be developing so that we
have an AI guidance document out of the office.
We were one of the first states to put out an AI guidance document, but our next step is how do we provide examples and resources so they can connect? So I agree, Dr. Poe. Our next is, for example, how can teachers use this to better develop lesson plans or come up with curriculum, or how do students really evaluate? I talked to a teacher recently, and she gave a science assessment or a science assignment, and then she went to AI to ask the AI to do the assignment.
Yeah.
Then she changed the assignment.
Yeah.
She said, if a student can just put this in, I need to rethink what type of assignment I'm giving. So, I go back to, and it sounds, I'm dating myself. I can remember when graphing calculators were put into the classroom. And
Exactly.
As a math teacher, how do you better utilize that technology to make sure students are getting what they need, but also to have the foundations to know what's going on as you go through. So there's a balance there. And one of the comments that was made at the CCSSO conference was, regardless of the industry, regardless of your job, we need to know how to utilize artificial intelligence. We won't be replaced by artificial intelligence. That was the comment, but we may be replaced by someone who knows how to use artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and a lot of instructional designers are actually including things like AI impervious assignment development. So kind of getting ahead, not tricking the system, but getting ahead of the tools that kids have at their immediate disposal and thinking about ways that you ratchet up the rigor of the assignment, the depth of knowledge of the assignment, the critical thinking of the assignment, I think is where teachers find themselves now.
I learned also a lot about the term or the phrase hallucinations by artificial intelligence.
It makes stuff up.
It just makes stuff up. So we have to be able to read through that. And, that was a new phrase for me, hallucinations by artificial intelligence, and making sure that students can look at that and make sure that that's factual and have that basis.
To me, it's just the next step of how when Google came out, and you could utilize the things that you have to still be able to think for yourself and understand and critique that information.
You're exactly right.
The same type of thing with Wikipedia and with Google and those things as we move along. But great point. Thank you, Dr. Poe. Also, as far as the vibrant learning experiences in our state schools, the Kentucky School for the Deaf Future Farmers of America, which we heard about a little bit about FFA earlier, that team had an amazing time visiting Indianapolis at the 97th National FFA Convention. And 2 of our KSD high school students successfully passed and earned the Drone Unmanned Flight Trust Certification, also known as the Recreational Unmanned Aircraft System Safety Test. And I see Dr. Pate shaking his head about that. I'm sure he can give us some information as we move along with that. But also, too, the second Abacus Bee took place at the Kentucky School for the Blind on October 29th. The contest included 9 KSB students and focused on mental math and using an abacus. I look forward to hearing more from KSB Principal Peggy Sinclair Morris and the KSB music teacher Emily Campbell, who are traveling this week to Washington, D.C. to see the ornaments that were designed by KSB students to be placed on the national Christmas tree. Also, our area technology centers continue to connect local business and industry leaders directly with students, 11 of 15 Bullock County ATC emergency medical technicians, EMT students, recently attended the Bullock County First Responder Luncheon hosted by the local Chamber of Commerce. And since the program began in 2021, the Bullock County ATC students make up approximately 10% of the Bullock County EMS.
Oh, wow.
Talking about certifications, moving straight into work, perfect example. And many of the graduates of the first cohort are now advanced EMT and paramedics. Two other things I will add, just for we're talking about some things going on in the department, and there's so many things, but I'm going to give you two that I'm going to mention. The first is this is the first meeting in a long time that now Associate Commissioner Meredith Brewer was unable to attend. As so many of you may have known, her father passed away, and our thoughts are with her. But again, she's not in her role. We're very thankful for Glyptis and Dr. Jones that is doing a great job. But one of the things that she's worked with the staff is we talk about how we have 9 different pathways for alternate certification for teachers and how that's often hard to navigate. We now have essentially a responsive survey so that a person can answer one question. If they're interested in going into education, they can answer one question, maybe 2 or 3 questions. Then it'll say, this is the best option for you, and this is how you complete it. So putting that out to people as far as how do you navigate all those options, because we hear that a lot, is which option is best for me? Well, if you get on our website, look at those options. It's a very responsive. It may only take 1 or 2 questions, but it can go as high as 4 or 5 questions to say this is the best option for you.
Is that pretty utilized? Do you have a?
Well, we just revised it. It was an older one that didn't include option 9, so it was just revised in the past couple of weeks. So we're getting that out now.
Gotcha.
So thank you for asking that. Then he also too, we're talking about collaboration and partnerships. We're working with our Office of Career Technical and also our Office of Teaching and Learning, and our science specialists have been working with the governor's office and also with Commissioner Shell. We're working on an all-in for Ag Week. We won't talk any more about that. There's going to be a particular announcement about that, but very excited about that work. I don't want to steal Commissioner Shell's thunder, but he just very excited about those opportunities to work with our governor's office, but also too, I have meetings with our legislators next week talking about the accountability system and the opportunity to collaborate with our legislators also too. So those collaborations are the third pillar of what we look into and to make decisions. Vibrant learning, innovations, particularly around innovations, especially around accountability, but also collaboration, which is such as an important part. That being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Young.
Appreciate the abbreviated report, but board members, you will find the commissioner's full report in your portal, along with lots and lots of additional photos. So we really appreciate kind of catching up with what you've been doing, hanging out over the last couple of months. Any questions for Commissioner Flesher before we move to action items? All right, keep up that good visibility. We appreciate it so much and hear about it all the time. The next item on our agenda is we will be moving to our action and discussion items. And I really would like to call Matt Ross up just so I can send him back, but it's time for Associate Commissioner Kelly Foster and Director Dr. Matthew Courtney on 704 KAR 3:315.
I paused there for a second. If you notice my step, I was like, wait a minute, are we at the wrong
Just
place?
messing
The
with
wrong
him
time?
from yesterday, Kelly.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This morning, we are bringing a new regulation to you all, and I'm going to let Matthew walk you through a couple of slides that talks about the specifics of the regulation. But we have had a working relationship with the Non-Public Schools Council since 1992. And typically in the spring, we bring non-public schools, a list of non-public schools to you all to certify that list. And so this regulation is really being put in place to ensure that there are clear procedures for the non-public schools organization, so that when we bring that information to you, we know that there is a process in place and there are checks and balances within that organization. So they have been at the table with us throughout this process, and just want to bring this to you, and then we'll be glad to take any questions. So Dr. Courtney, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Foster said, just a couple pieces of background here. KRS 156.160 provides that non-public schools may voluntarily seek certification by the board. And basically that certification is saying that they have agreed to comply with the minimum guidelines established by the KBE for all schools in Kentucky. That is a voluntary process. Since 1992, as a result of KIRA, KBE has collaborated with the Non-Public Schools Commission to complete that voluntary certification process. The process has remained relatively unchanged during that whole 30-plus year period.
Older board members, you may recall that we've approved those every year since we've been on the board.
Yes, so we bring
perfunctory.
Correct. We bring those every June to you, and usually those end up on the consent agenda item because it is a relatively routine item. And we do rely on the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission to prepare that list of schools for you to certify. So similar to what you do with KHSAA or with the School Boards Association, you have delegated some authority to the commission to prepare that list for certification each year. So this regulation really is putting some more structure around that and making the process a little more kind of locked in and official. Next slide, please. Since this is a new regulation, I will go through each section just so we make sure we don't miss anything. And then, of course, we'll pause for questions. Section 1 is our definition section. We've defined non-public school for this regulation as any private, parochial, home-based, or church school. And a public charter school, as defined by KRS 1601592, is not a non-public school for the purpose of this regulation.
So this is not a charter question.
That is correct. And we felt like it was important to include that piece of additional clarification in this definition. Charter schools cannot use this process to become certified. Next slide, please. Section 2 outlines the procedures for certification. These are basically the same procedures that we follow today. So the non-public school must seek accreditation from an approved accreditor. The non-public school must apply for voluntary certification through the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission. The Non-Public Schools Commission annually produces a list for consideration by the board, and then upon recommendation, the board may revoke certification during the school year. That little piece is new. We don't currently have a process to revoke certification. We just let schools fall off. They do not recertify. So as we're tweaking the process, we felt like it was important to allow for a mid-year revocation. We've never really had a need to do that, but since we're creating new procedures, we felt like it was important consideration at this time.
Matthew, before you leave that one, if you might, I have a sense of who KHSAA is and who KSBA is. I really appreciate that you've been collaborating with the Kentucky Non-Public School Commission, but I don't know who they are or how they become commissioners.
Sure. So the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission was established right after KIRA, primarily for this purpose. Their job is to ensure high quality non-public schools. They I don't want to say they govern non-public schools because by nature of being non-public schools, they're not governed by any central entity, right? That's what makes them non-public schools. But they provide guidance and support, some standardization of processes for non-public schools. They act as a fiscal agent occasionally for certain federal programs. Stronger Connections Grant, for example, is one relatively recent one you might be familiar with that they act as a fiscal agent for. And they're made up of non-public school executives from across the state. So right now, the chairperson of that board is David Kessler, who is from the Diocese of Owensboro. The vice chairman is Kendra McGuire from the Diocese of Covington. They also have representatives from the Catholic Schools Association, the International Christian Accrediting Association, the Association of Christian Schools International, Kentucky Association of Independent Schools. They have some members at large and some non-traditional program representatives.
Thank you.
Another good example that is very recent is our ESSER fund. So you know that the U.S. Department of Education allowed some federal dollars during COVID for our non-public schools. And so, you know, there's no way that KDE knows every non-public school out there. So we worked through the commission to ensure that those schools knew the information that was out there to how to make them eligible for those federal funds during COVID.
Okay, really interesting. Thank you. I just didn't have any background knowledge.
Yeah. I'll also add to that too. We do have a program staff person here at KDE who attends every board meeting and is embedded in their work as a sort of non-voting advisory member. Okay, so next slide, please. So Section 3 creates a series of new policies that we're asking the Commission to establish. So they're going to be establishing a policy for the selection and screening of eligible accrediting agencies. Right now, the only eligible accrediting agencies were those approved by the Board of Education in 1992. So that list of agencies hasn't changed. In the last 30 years, there are new accrediting agencies that non-public schools would like to be able to consider. So we've asked them to create a policy for how we might screen, or how they might screen and select new accrediting agencies, which they would then, of course, bring to you. The Commission will adopt a policy for how they recommend non-public schools to the KBE for certification. In early conversations with them, we're not expecting any procedural changes on their end for what that looks like, but we are asking them to put that down on paper, post that on the website so it's very clear to everyone what those steps look like. They will adopt a policy for recommending certification revocation. So again, that's not something that we've really done before, but we want them to think through and process when we might revoke a certification mid-year. We will be providing technical assistance and have been providing technical assistance to the Commission as they write this policy manual. And then they will annually submit the 3 policies to you for review and approval. We'll do that for the first time at the June board meeting. For these new policies. Next slide, please. Section 4 of the regulation outlines posting requirements. So a few things. One thing we're going to really try to do through this regulation and in practice is ensure that what is posted on our non-public schools website is exactly the same as what is posted on the Commission's website. We do a pretty good job of that right now, but we're just going to clarify that a little bit more. So the first thing we'll both be posting is a list of certified non-public schools. We're going to expand just a little bit the information that's on that list. So the list will include the name of the certified non-public school, the public school district in which the non-public school is physically located. That has some federal funding implications, so that's something that will help all of us be a little more clear. The grade level served, the physical address, the telephone number, a static email address, so something like info@nonpublicschools.com or something like that. The school's website URL and the expiration date of that school's voluntary certification. I should mention here that for that expiration date, schools are usually certified for 1 to 5 year periods, and it really depends on their accreditation cycle. So some schools, let's say you're a brand new non-public school, you might only qualify for a 1-year accreditation cycle, and then you might have to be reaccredited again a couple of times before that accreditor might let you have a 3 or a 5 year accreditation. And so those schools would need to be recertified every time they are reaccredited.
Okay, so that would be the same date.
It would be this,
Okay.
yes. So every school, that's why we think that data is so important. It's a little confusing right now on the record. And this will, of course, be a public record. So we think that this will help our public school districts better understand what non-public schools are in their system, to help parents better access non-public schools and be able to be in contact with them, and for us to be able to provide better technical assistance as well. Next slide, please. Both ourselves and the Commission will be posting on the website the list of approved accrediting agencies. So as those change in the future, that updated list will be public so that it is posted and transparent. And then we will also be posting the 3 required policies. So they'll develop those policies, you will approve those policies, and then they'll be posted on both of our websites so that everything is very clear. We get a lot of questions about these procedures, and recently, particularly from the legislature, there's a lot of interest in how a non-public school becomes certified. So we think this added layer of transparency will really help with that. And I think that's the end of my presentation.
Board members, you'll see in your portal that there's a letter of support for this work from the chair of the Kentucky Non-Public School Commission. I think that's a testament, Kelly, to you and Matthew for opening early lines of communication. You can imagine this could have been a source of strife. Governmental overreach or something could have been hurled. It didn't happen because of the way that you all approached it clearly. And I think this does provide some workable collaborative structures for this process to move forward in what I think is an important substantive way. So congratulations for getting us to this point. Board members, what questions might you have of Matthew and Kelly? Nailed it. Nailed it. All right. Thank you so much. At this time, then, I would entertain a motion to approve 704 KAR 3:315 certification of non-public schools. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Pate, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Woods, thank you so much. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the regulation, please respond by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Associate Commissioner Matt Ross. At this time, we'll take a look at a waiver request from the Hardin County Board of Education related to Section 4, subsection 4B of 702 KAR 4:050. Everybody's favorite, traversing easements.
Easements.
Right. This is the sexy stuff. So, Matt and Che.
Good morning. Good morning, Matt Ross, Associate Commissioner, Office of Finance and Operations. I have the infamous Che Ritter with me, Division Director, Division of District Support. So for those of you who aren't familiar with sort of our waiver requests that we bring, there's a regulation that prohibits districts from acquiring property that has traversing easements. So in essence, the intent of the regulation is to make sure that districts don't end up with a piece of property that they can't really use because of some easement. So, but by statute, the Kentucky Board of Education can waive some of its regulations under certain circumstances, as long as they don't impact health or safety or civil rights. And so that's what we have in this case. We have a district that has requested us to waive our part of our regulation that prohibits these traversing easements. And I'll let Che sort of give you the rundown on this piece of property and why we believe that why we support the district's request for waiver.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I apologize for my voice singing too often. We'll do that. This is a pretty large piece of property, Hardin County, a total of 116 acres. We do have a representative from the district with us if you all do have some detailed questions. But there are actually 4 traversing easements, 2 sanitary sewer and stormwater, 1 electric transmission, and then a utility and drainage easement. And the way the property is set up, the district, through their schematic plans, have indicated that none of these easements will not impact their construction. From my understanding, it's elementary, middle, high school, and athletic field. So this is a big development. And as my staff will tell you, it's hard to find a piece of property that large without a traversing easement. Staff was supportive of this waiver request. We've talked to the district on multiple occasions. We didn't see any issues with these easements at all. And as in the past, we review it with the district. We do a physical site inspection, as well as looking at schematic plans to make sure it's not going to impact their big plans for that piece of property.
But essentially, they're entering or exiting the property across somebody else's small piece of property.
Right. And if you think of, obviously when you're going to buy a piece of land, and as Matt said, the rule is you don't want to buy a piece of land that's unusable. In some cases, utilities may agree to move an easement. We'll work with the districts to do that. But in a lot of cases, they won't do that. They just say, well, we've got a major power line coming through there and we can't move it. So, or the cost is prohibitive, of course.
Thank you. Is that Jessica?
Yes.
Jessica, would you like to add anything? Thank you for being here.
No, I'm kind of filling in. We have a train presentation on our HVAC and lighting upgrade. So our COO is at that. But no, I think Che covered it all. We've been looking at this property, as you all know, what's going on in our district and, with Glendale and the factory. And we think it's hard to find a big area of property like this to build an entire campus. So,
yeah, Blue Oval is changing the landscape literally in your county. We know. Any questions for Jessica or for the KDE team?
Now, this is a good move for them and necessary.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, you probably know right the spot. Okay. Thank you so much. At this time, then, I would ask the board to I would entertain a motion to approve the waiver request from the Hardin County Board of Education relative to section 4, subsection 4B of 702 KAR 4:050, traversing easements. Do we have such a motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Dr. Pate, it's yours. Second, Mr. Trimble, thank you so much. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of approval respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Motion carries. Dr. Fletcher.
I would like to make one comment. We've talked about a road show, and I know that Matt's on the agenda again, but I want to take the opportunity to thank OFO and Division Director Ritter and also Matt Ross, our Associate Commissioner. One of the things we've talked about is superintendents have asked for an in-depth overview, if you will. In-depth and overview is too kind of contradictory, but having some trainings for superintendents as it relates to the SEEK formula and how does certain parts impact others. So there is a roadshow that the OFO is doing and going to different co-ops, to all the co-ops, as a matter of fact, individually to say this is an overview of SEEK, what particular parts of SEEK or what particular questions that you may have in your region that may be different than, what's happening in CKEC is probably a lot different than what's happening at KVEC in Eastern Kentucky. So there's going to be an overview of SEEK with some also an opportunity for each of the communities to say, or each of the co-ops to say, these are the specific questions that we have, and then spending the day with that group. So I want to thank OFO for that work on that. So thank you so much.
Sure. We would share those.
SEEK Whisperer.
Since you brought that up, can I ask him a question that I would
Certainly.
like to see addressed, I guess, on SEEK? Last year in the legislative session, I know there was question on the bonding or a new legislation passed on the bonding. So I need to kind of understand how that affects or doesn't affect within SEEK, because you used to have a finance corporation and bond one way. Now the general board can offer their thing. So how is that working? So like if I've got use an example, 5 million in the bank, I could bond potentially 50 million over here. But now if I take that money, how do I bond out of general fund? And does that money then transfer back here to the general fund? Or how do they meet those obligations of the bonds? Now, they don't have to go through the finance corporation any longer with the new legislation.
Right.
So that would be a question if I'm on your road show.
Yeah.
Sitting there, I would want to know, because nobody's been able to explain that to me yet.
Well, let me get with our bond folks, but we haven't had too many of the general obligation bonds come through yet.
But I know there's, between those agencies out there, one's pushing more than the others. But I'm not sure that the superintendents understand how that can affect the SEEK, because there's got to be an effect on it. Because if you're moving money from one side, from the finance corporation to the general fund to issue, you're going to be paying that out of the general fund.
Right.
So that's going to affect something.
Right. Absolutely.
Because there's always unintended consequences. But I think they need to know that.
We'll get you an answer to that, Dr. Poe. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what we need to talk about. This is the reason for the SEEK Roadshow, is to have those type of opportunities for questions with superintendents.
And I know I know there's a task force to look at SEEK, from the legislature. So that's why I was wondering how this.
It's been looked
thing,
at
but how
several
does it
times.
affect
Yeah,
you?
and we are happy to provide. I'll get those dates to Glyptis if you all are interested in showing up at something that's in your area. We'd love to have you. We've invited. It's a pretty wide open invitation to legislators, local, superintendents, really anybody in the community that's interested in learning how the factors in their community are really impacting their district's needs, that, whether it's property, the rise in property value, or the loss of enrollment, loss of population. So we really try to do a survey and get it out to all the districts or all the regions and get responses back as to what they see as their local sort of issues. So we're hoping it to be a really meaningful sort of, day. So
Thank you. Excellent. And Associate Commissioner Ross also has an update for us. We've been following the journey of Boyd County.
Yes, I think we have Superintendent Boblet and Finance Officer Barber on virtually. I won't steal their thunder too much, but they have made their first installment on their loan repayment. So we are happy to see that. So I'll let them sort of tell you where they think they are.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the board again. I pray that everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope that you all had the opportunity to spend some quality time with your friends and family. Before I have Mr. Barber jump in with the financial information, I'd like to give you a quick update on the improvement priority areas 1, 2, and 4 of our 30, 60, 90-day plan. In improvement area 1, we've adopted a year-at-a-glance calendar. Our center office leadership team meets weekly to discuss specific agenda items, to include updates on student and staff attendance, financial status, curriculum and instructional items, and many more. We've also developed a comprehensive organizational chart and completed a new classified evaluation document for our instructional assistants. We have created and implemented school-level attendance teams to assist students with truancy issues and to hopefully keep them out of the truancy process. In improvement area 2, our board chair has identified specific training needs to be completed by the end of the school year. These training areas include more in-depth training on school finance, specifically what questions should they be asking the finance director, our Board of Education member, and how can Board of Education members allocate money that best meets the needs of individual schools, and also equity versus equality when it comes to funding our schools. In improvement area 4, we've developed a district-wide PLC protocol and that has been collaboratively planned and created. We've also created and implemented district student success team, and that's been implemented to assist teachers with academic accountability and also student achievement. I'll now have Mr. Barber speak on priority area 3.
Good morning. As Mr. Barber said, my name is Larry Barber, and I am the finance director here at Boyd County Schools since July of this year. And I just want to share a few positive signs that I see that the district is moving in the right direction. I've shared this with you guys before, but I'm going to kind of re-emphasize it again just to remind you of it as well. But in September, our board did approve a working budget with a contingency of $844,000, which translates to 2.9%, which is above the 2% required minimum as well. I'm happy to report too that each month, as I speak with our board, I provide them with a budget snapshot that is kind of a condensed version of the financial reports that they get as well. And I was happy to report with them through October of this year, all of our particular areas, such as schools, district admin, facilities and operations, and our transportation were all within where they should be as far as budget use. For those first 4 months, they should have been at about 33%. I'm happy to report that all of those areas were at 33% or below, which indicates to me that our employees across the district are taking very seriously as far as following the budget that the board has set in place and has approved as well. Also, too, we're trying to work through some processes here with the assistance of KBE and some things too that we thought needed to be kind of strengthened in our district as well. One of those areas is improving our intentional communication between the finance department and the other areas, other stakeholders of our district as well. So in that, to that end, we have provided the finance director has regular financial updates with the board at each of their board meetings here, dialogue with them and address any questions and issues on the reports during that particular section of the board meeting. The finance director and superintendent have been more intentional in having weekly meetings so that we can discuss any items that have arisen in the district that either I need to share with him or he may need to share with me as well. And then also the finance director and the principals and department supervisors meet every month, a meeting district-wide there where they are provided with their monthly reports. And then also the finance director has been scheduling meetings with them so that we can make sure that they understand what those reports are telling them so that they can stay within the budget for their particular areas as well. Another thing that we have worked on that I think is going to strengthen us and help us to move forward in a positive way is improving the process of a working budget that we think more accurately reflects the costs that are associated with providing a quality education to the students of our district. And to that end, Mr. Bobbitt, our superintendent, and I have put together a budget committee, and that budget committee is going to be meeting on December 10th next week there. We have the agenda that we're going to be talking about is the importance of a workable budget, kind of where we were, where we are, where we think that we need to be going, those type of items, where our revenue comes from, where we actually spend our money as far as the district, and then also getting their input, which we've already provided to them previously, getting their input on what are the needs assessment that they have for each of the particular areas for which they are responsible as well, so that we can kind of determine a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan as to what needs that we see for the district as well. But we also want to give them a little bit of opportunity to dream as well. So in the beginning here, we're probably going to have to be focusing more on our needs, but we want them to be looking at what are the wants. What are some of the things that we can be doing as a district and that we can be allocating our resources that are going to improve the quality of the education for our students here. So I've asked them to do that too on a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year plan. What are your dreams as far as how we can improve the quality of education for our students here and use those resources that we have at our disposal in the most productive way to that end as well. We also will be addressing with them as far as our staffing allocations to make sure that our general fund is staying within the staffing allocations that our board has approved. And in order to help us with our financial position as well. So those were some of the things I see as positive signs. I think moving forward, it's been challenging here in the beginning. It's not a place that our district wants to be, but I believe that we're building some foundations that are going to help us move forward and in a positive way in the future.
Well, I think you're exactly right. Superintendent Bobbitt, you and your team are to be commended for the way that you have responded to finding yourselves underwater in the spring, approaching belt tightening and better communication right from the start, accepting feedback and direction from the agency, and then threading a needle from austerity to aspiration. I think is a really powerful place to find yourselves 5 or 6 months down the road. So I thought that was a very optimistic report. You have great support from this Board of Education to continue the good work that you're doing there. And it could be a model of fiscal turnaround perhaps for the state. Dr. Poe. Did you have a question?
No, I was just writing down.
He's just taking positive notes as well. Dr. Fletcher.
I do want to make a couple of comments. First of all, Superintendent Bobbitt, I want to personally thank you for, first of all, you approached this with transparency and with collaboration. And one of the things that was mentioned is talking about collaboration with KDE and assistance from KDE, not only from OFO, thank you again, Associate Commissioner Ross and your entire team that have worked with Boyd County so quickly and effectively, but also too, something that's may not often be mentioned, Dr. Foster and the Office of Continuous Improvement Support. A lot of these processes that you're hearing from Boyd County, there was a lot of collaboration from her office too. So when we talk about that being a resource for our districts, we have so many different agencies, so many different offices that step in very quickly to help districts at the drop of as quickly as possible. I'll say men and women, if you will. So again, I do want to thank our OFO and OCIS for the work and their collaboration with Boyd County. Again, thank you too, Superintendent Bobbitt, for your transparency and collaboration also.
Thank you, Commissioner Fitt.
Matt, anything
Excuse
to
me.
No, not at all.
Pardon me, Superintendent Bobbitt, did you have something to add?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I just want to say thank you, and thank you, Dr. Fletcher. I'd like to thank the members of the Board of Education, Kentucky Board of Education, Commissioner Fletcher, Dr. Foster, and members of her team. And you are correct, Dr. Fletcher. The ability for them to come in quickly and assist us in a quick manner, and then to move forward through our improvement planning process has been wonderful. We meet with them again on December 10th, so next week, and we'll be kind of finalizing the 60-day portion of our plan and moving on into the 90-day portion of our plan Again, I'd like to thank the members of her team, Matt Ross and Shay Ritter, and the members of their team. Your assistance over the last eight months has been invaluable. Hope everyone has a very, very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a wonderful New Year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nice report. Excellent. At this time, we'll have a parade of associate commissioners come to the table. Associate Commissioners Sims and Foster, along with KDE Chief Academic Officer Mickey Ray Marinelli. This is Data at a Glance and statewide efforts to support teaching and learning. Welcome, friends.
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And we're going to just do some high-level highlights of information we shared back in early October, all of the briefing packet materials from the most recent assessment and accountability system. And we've been with the legislature and other groups going over that data in detail. And as you can imagine, the briefing packet's about 60 pages long, and we didn't really think you wanted to go through all 60 pages. You've had the opportunity. Right, you had the opportunity to read that. But we do think, because what we see in that information obviously informs our work here at KDE and the supports we can provide to schools, as well as some of your decision making. I think one thing to keep in mind, we've all been a part of some exciting new work about a new assessment and accountability system. So, there's lots of opportunity for things to moderate, to change, to improve, and to support student learning. I like to think of this a little bit. We're in that process of designing an exciting new house, but we're still living in the current house. So we have to do a little bit of maintenance to it and sharing some information about it and using that to inform our work. And as we go through the slide deck here, we'll just highlight really not the data itself, but some of the takeaways from the data. Again, we were able to publicly release October 3rd. The thing that was different around release this year is we did not have fully the school report card in place yet. We have a vendor change with that program, and so we released using spreadsheets and open house. And then we had a lot of opportunity with districts to help support their work with individual student data and data files out of our Office of Assessment and Accountability. So those were released on October 3rd. Some takeaways that we see is that we have some data where there's maintenance of where we were last year. We have some places where we have improvement, and we have some places for some growth. And we're going to highlight one of those in a little more detail. But first, let's kind of highlight the positive. Where are some things we see? And I also always want to caution, this is a one point in time assessment. It is given over some multiple days because it's multiple content areas. But again, as we're moving toward this idea that it can be more holistic, that we can see more of the whole child and the whole experience of education in the system, I think is what's so exciting about the new. But this is a point in time assessment. We are focusing on proficient and distinguished, which are their upper two levels of performance for students. There's novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, and our report. And that has really been the way we've kind of discussed the data over time with groups. Many times that's a request from our legislators to look at those upper two levels as well. So just to be consistent with what we shared with other groups, in the area of maintaining the percent of proficient, distinguished, we saw that at elementary reading and math and on-demand writing are kind of holding at the same level. Reading at middle school and high school social studies was also maintaining. We saw increases in proficient and distinguished at the middle school level in math, social studies, and on-demand writing, and at the high school level in reading, math, and on-demand writing. We saw there was an increase in the 4- and 5-year graduation rate. So remember, federally, we're required to look at the 4-year graduates and turn that in as part of CSI designation. But the state also considers the 5-year graduate, the student that takes a bit longer. And really, that reflects effort by both the student, the parents, the school to keep that student engaged and get them to the completion line. So we do recognize 4- and 5-year, and there was an increase with nearly all student groups on the grad rate. As we move, and I'll just mention, I went back to check the groups. I think the group that didn't show is a group that's very small in Kentucky. I think it was our Native American Pacific Islander group, which is very tiny in the state of Kentucky. As we look at growth areas, and this is, we want to spend most of our time with you on this, we do still see gaps in the performance. Those are typical to any standardized type of assessment. If you look at ACT and others, you'll see similar patterns of gaps. Obviously, our students in those three groups that we've listed there were not performing as high. And that obviously informs work in the offices, particularly that support our students with disabilities, English learners, and African American students. I will mention for our English learners, that continues to be a really growing population in Kentucky. We started that assessment with WIDA, which is the assessment we use, the access test. We're part of a WIDA consortium based out of the University of Wisconsin that tests the English acquisition for English language students. And we began that testing back in 2006 with about 10,000 students in Kentucky that qualified as English learners, and we're now up to over 40,000 students. And so that's been a substantial continuing growth. And some of our districts have fairly high rates of English language learners. So obviously that's another group where supports become very important, as well as our African American students.
Are these the three largest groups or just three examples?
Those are the three most significant. Yeah, the more where the largest groups, where we see gaps more across all content area, are those three groups. So the ones I would say are the more significant focus of where the gaps are.
So this is even larger than free and reduced lunch, socioeconomic.
It is a little bit larger on most of them. And now free and reduced lunch obviously is a group we also look at in Kentucky, but keep in mind that many districts have large populations. So it's almost their whole population when you look at free and reduced lunch performance. Science is something we want to talk about a little deeper on the next few slides. We also had decline really across all the levels of science. And elementary and middle, it's very slight. But at high school, it was more significant. And we're going to deal with that with a little more detail. But first, in general, as we've kind of looked at things that contribute as well as the test, we want to go to the next slide. And two factors we do see that we think that impact what we see in the test results, that certainly how to winnow out exact impact is more complicated. But chronic absenteeism, that has been something the department has put a lot of emphasis on with our campaign to "You Were Missed, Be Back in School." It is a significant issue. And then the teacher shortage continues to be an area, especially for certain content areas. I've certainly heard anecdotally of people having chemistry positions open for years, trying to find a teacher that's qualified with chemistry. So those two factors, I think you will see in more general work from the department and emphasis and support through our communications area as well as other groups. And certainly I know you're aware of the absentee campaign and the public messaging campaign around teachers that is getting ready to gear up. So let's look a little more deeply at science. And I will say of any of the content area results, science has been the one with attention this year. There's been lots of conversation, lots of deeper looks. We do a process because science is required federally as an assessment, and we really apply this process to all content areas. But reading, math, and science, those assessments must go through what's called a peer review process, and you have to meet a lot of technical standards around the assessment. So we normally have in our processes meeting those technical standards. We're required in state law to also have what's called a third-party validation. And we have a third independent vendor that also comes along and looks at the technical properties of the assessment. So when we see our science performance, we not only did that normal level of diligence, we actually went back and asked people to look yet again at the science performance and to see if there was anything technically in the assessment itself. We did not uncover anything with that. But as we move to the next slide and look at a little bit more, I want to remind you of a few things about the assessment, and then we want to look at the data piece as well. The Kentucky summative assessments are what are called criterion referenced assessments. And that means you're measuring to a standard, and the standard is the Kentucky academic standards that Mickey's group appears with you very often around the standards that are on a rotation every 6 years to have a review. So we are required by federal law to measure the standards. And then we have to demonstrate we have measured the standards through an independent alignment. So we have taken those steps and we've done those steps and processes. The criterion referenced assessment is a state requirement. So that is in state law that it be a criterion referenced assessment that measures Kentucky standards. But at a federal level, whatever assessments you use have to measure your state's content standards, and you have to demonstrate that federally. We do have Kentucky teachers involved in all of the processes. And I will say that I know there's been lots of concerns around science. In no way would anyone in my office be talking about this as a negative toward teachers. We know we have some really great science instruction going on, and we see that performance in other measures that are out there that people are showing really tight connections to. So in no way do we think this is some teacher issue either. And so I just want to be sure that people hear that loudly, that this is an issue many times of how all of the pieces kind of come together in the assessment. And we'll hear more about standards a little bit from Mickey, I'm sure. But teachers are involved, and this is required in state law, that teachers are involved in all the testing processes. So we have teachers who help develop the items, revise the items, review the items. We have a blueprint that's established as part of the standard setting process of what emphasis is on the test. So to give you an example from social studies, what percentage of the social studies test is history? What percentage of it is economics? So how those things play out is part of that blueprint process. The development of the items, the standard setting around what is novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished. So we had teachers involved in all of those pieces when the standards were established. And as we go, and one thing I will mention about the standards, I'll save that to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide and look at the data. And this is what I think, obviously has everyone concerned. And I think we need to look deeper looks, and we've got some immediate actions we can take. So as we look at the science data, we're going back to 2018. And these are all on the same scale. Now, you'll notice some little 1s and 2s at the top there. Historically, Kentucky used for a while at high school end of course testing that was linked to particular test. So I think we did biology for science, we had algebra 2 for mathematics, and we used those for the state test for high school. We purchased those from ACT. ACT ended that program. They no longer offered end of course testing. And during that time, Kentucky had a transition to go to a summative assessment again for high school. So we had a transition period in 2018 that 30% at high school was based on the ACT, the general ACT that all juniors take in Kentucky. But the elementary and the middle school was on the new standards and the setting of new standards. So we were at about 31%, 26% at proficient and distinguished. In 19, you see those numbers stay really quite consistent. In 19, high school was set for the first time on the new standards. And then we had 2 years that we all remember, and those are the COVID years. No testing at all. Obviously, a very different experience for students. Then we come back in 22, and again, these items that are being used in 22, 23, 24 are actually created back in 18 and 19. So these are not new items. These are items, the pool was created back in 18 and 19. And those items continue to be pulled out of the pool. Now, we release items every year. So some items leave the pool, not used again, and new items come in, circulate into the test. But the items were created, the standards were all set back in those first years within the COVID break. But obviously the pattern, if you look at, for elementaries, for example, where we started back in 18, we're doing better than that. We've gone up to 34% proficient distinguished. At middle school, it's slightly lower, from 26 to 22. And at high school is where we see that each year becoming a little bit lower. And so we are thinking, what do we need to do about this action from an assessment point of view? But also, what do you need to do in terms of just looking more deeply at how do we interact with the science standards and the assessment, and then how those standards get sort of interpreted and used. And of course, high school uses a course structure that's a little different than elementary, for example. So as we move to the next slide, is talk just a little bit about the standards and what we propose and what we're moving forward with on the assessment piece immediately. Because again, like we've talked about phasing in things, I think you've got sort of a quick thing you can bring in with the assessment. I think this requires some additional look at research. And then I think we need to think, what long term should science look like? Because we had great conversation yesterday that Jennifer led around the performance element of science.
Yeah.
And really that is a very much a challenge to assess in a online standardized sort of form of a test. The standards in Kentucky are challenging standards. They sort of are descended from the next generation science standards. That was a national voluntary work. And then they have been obviously utilized and used in Kentucky with Kentucky teachers to establish those Kentucky standards. Now, we've already now gone through another cycle of science standard revision. So they're on a 6-year cycle with the legislature. So in 22, that work came to you as a board in December, became a law by July of 23. So once those standards are in place, that revision, we begin to work on the refreshment of the test immediately. And so those new standards, once they're adopted, those items start being created with Kentucky teachers. These would be new items, not those items back from 18 and 19, but new items. And students are going to encounter those items this spring. Now, what this has done, this is a normal process, but we've accelerated it by a year. So this year, the tests will have modifications. We'll talk about that on the next slide, but those items will be in place. Students will take those items and we will bring together teachers, a good, strong representative group across the state, and have them look again at student performance and where the cuts for the assessment should be. So this will be a new science test next year. And it is kind of an interim phase in, but I think as we think about the assessments of the future, then we need to think, is there something that we should do differently? Now, we listen to teachers, we listen to DACs, we ask for feedback after the test is administered each year. And some things we consistently heard about science, the assessment piece of it, not the standards, is that it's challenging. And it has a lot of items that are in clusters. So like we measure reading, students read passages, and then they have 8 to 10 items that connect to those passages. Science is structured that way as well, and that there's sort of science phenomenon is the organizing principle, and there are particular things to look at for science. And then once you look at those items, there are items that link directly to those pieces of stimuli you've been given. And it's about 8 items. We find that teachers think that's a heavy reading load for kids to process with science.
Yeah.
So the refreshment goals, and Pearson has been a great partner to be able to accelerate this work by a year with us. And so we want to make sure that items have entry points for kids at all kinds of levels of performance. We wanted to maintain the link to the standards. We're required again to measure those standards, and we try to reduce the reading load and broaden the content coverage a bit. So that was the goals.
Really good description, Rhonda. I had a chance to talk to Dr. Stafford about this as well. I think the wheels are off on science, but I absolutely have every confidence that we will figure this out.
I think so.
As this feedback is incorporated in the way you're designing tests. One of the things I'll share with Dr. Stafford shared with me that I'm really kind of proud of is that in these conversations with educators across Kentucky, teachers are not saying make it easier.
No.
Teachers are saying it's too heavy in content-based informational reading. Let's make it more about science and less about a student's ability to read in the content area.
Right.
And then coupling it with vibrant learning experiences and performance, let's take a broader look at what students are able to do in science across the Commonwealth instead of the kind of heavy informational reading that it has been.
That's exactly right.
I just think it's laudable that folks are not out there saying, let's make this easier on ourselves. That is not the point.
No, that is not the
It's about
conversation.
figuring out how to meet the demands of a more rigorous set of science standards in such a way that it doesn't discourage or disadvantage students in the process. So this conversation about multiple entry points into the assessment, I think is phenomenal.
Right.
I think, Chair Young, it's also continuation of this engagement conversation.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Engage with rote memorization processes.
That's
To
exactly
engage
right.
with
Heavy
application.
science reading. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And
And-
again, just to emphasize that, you know, a lot of the comments we hear is that we feel, a lot of people say that they feel like the science is a reading endurance test as much as of a science
Right.
test.
Right.
So a reading endurance
Agreed.
test, think about that.
Agreed.
So we had those goals, and as we move to the next slide, we'll show you some examples of how this changed. And we'll be getting, you know, this information we're sharing out through our DAC network and getting it out to teachers. We'll continue to have some of the same item types, and we have those listed there for you. Constructed's anywhere where child writes out some part of the answer. Technology enhanced, where the computer can move around things within the response, and then multiple choice, multiple select. But we're also incorporating some new item types: short answer items, standalone single items with content. And while there will remain some longer clusters, because we have to do some linkage from tests from year to year, we will move to shorter clusters of items where maybe 4 items linked together and not 8. And that takes a shorter stimuli then to lead into those items. So we'll incorporate those smaller clusters as well
That's
into
an
the
access
system.
question.
And so those will be experienced this year, and then we'll accelerate that process to get those standards and the standards reset. And so it might mean the test is a little longer in science to get some of these items in, but we may have a little more delay of reporting in order to get the standards set. But we think it's the right thing to do that is a immediate phase in to adjust the assessment and respond to what we hear from people around the assessment that's a challenge. The standards, you know, do have multiple parts. They have the disciplinary concepts, core concepts, which are more similar to what we've always had, but they also have science and engineering practices, and they also have cross-cutting concepts, and that's not as familiar to teachers. So there's still, I think, teachers getting their hands around that and embedding that as part of these standards. Yes, Holly.
Was there any additional feedback about why it's going down? Like, I understand that it's the load of reading possibly, but does that mean our students, their stamina is going down? Because it's a, you know.
Yeah,
the
that I don't think,
decrease.
I think that's a great question, Holly. And we have been talking to one of our research companies that works with us on research to see if we can develop some research into if we can get a better sense of what's occurring at high school. And maybe at middle as well, where you just have different kinds of structures. But I don't think we have a great answer to that. We first started with the assessment, but I think we've got to look deeper at that.
How does it compare to their informational reading? Is there a test? That
Right.
kind
The
of
reading
measures it?
reading scores have actually remained pretty consistent, and even have gone at high school, they've actually tweaked up just a little bit. So, you know, it could be, you know, you're reading in a very heavy content load when you're reading science. You know, it's academic science content. So that might be affecting the reading piece of it as well.
And we
The
don't have a
test
lot
is
of
similar if why it's going down.
Right.
We don't have a lot
right.
of stability in the data yet with 5 cohorts of elementary and middle and 4
Right.
cohorts of high. We don't have students that we can look back and say, oh, here's how elementary students performed at middle and that same cohort of students at high. I mean, we can begin to see that, but it is pretty
And is it
thin
over
data.
schools, or are there some schools that are?
No,
really
there's some
high?
schools. Yeah, there's still a distribution. Some schools are performing high. So I think the conversation is, you know, you want to go into some of those higher performing schools, ask some questions, go into some of the middle performing and some of the low performing, and ask some questions. Try to get into some sort of operational detail that just could inform the work and maybe the future of where you go with science and education. I will mention one little data fact before we go. Let me mention this because you brought this up and it flagged my memory. We had the COVID years. So actually the students that took high school science this past year had not had a science state test since 4th grade.
Right.
There was no middle school testing of
So
those
it's
students.
really thin in terms of
Right.
predictability and
Right.
trend, I think.
Yes.
Well, you know, I think you're on the right road. I think it's in the design of the test and not our students and not our teachers. So
Right,
I want to be on
absolutely.
record, just like you are in relationship, because they're working hard. And we're not necessarily seeing a decrease in triangulation of data from other tests.
Right.
So I think, you know, my hardest part of this thing is that this school, this score of 6% does not represent in any way the value of our students having in science. They are performing. Our dual credits up, our ACT score in science is up.
Right.
And AP's up in science, and we're having more kids with threes in science. And so it is in the design. So I think you're on the right path. And that's what I wanted to say, because I think there's that question of validity of a test. So this test passes the validity from testing standards, but it's not valid in what we're doing in relationship to science in our classrooms. And we got to figure that out.
It doesn't capture fully the good work that's
Correct.
Going on.
Yeah,
I think is
because there are increase in science in the post-secondary level. So as those kids that were in fourth grade, as you mentioned, who's in 12th grade, who's leaving us, as Dr. Thompson said, are scoring higher in science at the post-secondary level. So I think it's important for all of us to know when we get questions from out there, because I know our Northern Kentucky schools have got bombarded from the papers and the others and saying our kids lack science. They don't lack science. And that's the message we got to continue to put out there. From what we hear, enrollment post-secondary is going up, and they have to pass that proficiency in order to be in post-secondary. So that's the biggest concern here. So I'm just applauding you on the right direction that you're taking, because I really do think it's in the design of this particular test and not on the content, going back to the question that was brought up from Holly in relationship to kids are reading. Reading scores are going up at the high school level. Writing scores are going up at high school level. So it's the design of that particular work.
And
I had to say that.
Eager to
Sorry, I had to get
that,
that out.
change it.
Preston.
I was just going to speak to Mr. Poe's statement about science scores as a whole are going up, but KSA and state testing are going down. And I think that's pretty representative of state testing as a whole. A big problem with that is just motivating the students to fully apply themselves on state testing. The science test, I believe, is administered to juniors. In May. May is always a big time for testing as a whole. You have AP exams that are just a few weeks afterwards. What pushes these students to try? So I believe that's probably a big part of that. And especially with the test like science, where a lot of that is endurance reading, some of these students see these big passages, they give up. What is the necessary motivation for them to apply themselves fully on these state testing? So I think these changes will.
That's a great point.
Let's just have one question.
Oh, Ms. Woods.
Do you want to go first?
Well, I'll just follow up. Back in 18 and 19 also, when we were taking the ACT as the end of course assessment, those were also, to the question over here, Preston brought, those were tied into grading, because you could give 10% of that score over here.
That's
With
right.
the state assessments, we couldn't give that. So, see, I think that's what these people who's on the outside, and we got our critics on the outside, you know who they are without me saying them, but they don't go down to your asterisks at the bottom and say, you can't compare this to this.
That's exactly
So the
right.
6% can't even be compared to the 30%. So we're not dropping. That was a totally different.
The first 30%.
Yeah, the first 30%, in 19. To 6%. You can't compare those as a drop. They're totally different tests. ACT end of course assessment's totally different than our state accountability test.
And certainly the AP assessment is, an end of course assessment with a structured curriculum that the test follows exactly and tied into the grade.
Conversations are comparing and saying 30 to 6. Those are non-comparable. That's not comparable data.
Yeah. I think the 30, though, Dr. Poe refers back to we use the ACT, but we actually set a cut for novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished. So that's why it's listed here on the list. Right. It was used for the federal.
Yeah, but that's still a different test.
It's a different test.
Than
You're
the
absolutely
end
right.
course. So we're comparing two different data sets.
Right.
So unless we have what we used to call a crosswalk over, we really can't compare that data.
Right.
I'm just,
yeah.
That's my thing as a superintendent coming out, trying to explain this to the public when they look at data and say, you dropped 24% in your science. No, we didn't.
Yeah.
It's It's, we got to go through that. You know, Dr. Pruitt said it, you know, the checkout speech versus the long grocery store speech.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and we can't do that in a
That's right.
checkout standard
That's
of
right.
trying to explain this.
That's
But
right.
this is what the you know, was published in articles, that we had such a dramatic decrease when we really did not, if we're triangulating data.
Ms. Wood.
Okay, just real quickly, will the refresh plan be ready in spring of 2025?
It will.
Okay.
Again,
How
we've
is that being
accelerated.
communicated to?
We go always through our DAC, District Assessment Network, and then that gets flowed out to the teachers as well. So really, this has just gotten totally formalized, but we can accelerate it by a year. It normally would have done this a year from now, so it would have been not
Is it
coming
not
into
shared with
26.
parents or other affinity groups?
We will work on getting some messages out
Through
on
the
that.
DACs?
Yeah, through the DACs, or we can also utilize the communications here at the department. So we can talk about changes through Kentucky Teacher. We can also flow things out to the, parent teacher, various groups like PTA and others. So we can work on getting that message out more broadly.
We've also already talked with LSAC about this too.
That's right.
Supervisor,
We have.
and getting that out through superintendent's DACs, and then also, making sure that we have those type of items in Kentucky Teacher, but also out to our parents too. How do we get that out?
So we have to do the testing in May, in the spring?
Right now, it's in state law that way.
Okay.
It's defined as the last 14 days of instruction, or during the last 14 days of instruction.
Ms. Kyle.
Real quickly. So what
Mm-hmm.
hits me as a parent when some of our schools are on block scheduling versus very year long. So when my child was taking some of the state testing and they had an entire 6 months since they've had the content, I don't put a lot of weight into that kind of a system.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually even makes me think back to the Cool Council and our new assessment and accountability system, because we do have schools that are block scheduling, our dual credits are in block. Should we be looking at two different time frames for certain areas being tested based on when the kids are taking courses? Because it's not fair to the kids and to the schools. I mean, I know some schools are now even moving their courses to like the second semester, which actually ends up harming some of our students because then it messes around with the sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for that, that's going to be one of my comments now on the new assessment accountability.
Sure.
Should we be looking at two different testing time periods because of our schools being on block scheduling and dual credits, and being able to test at a relevant time to the kids when they've learned the material?
Yeah.
That brings up a relevant thing. Years ago, we studied on EPSB and the kids graduating with 4.0 coming out of post-secondary, but couldn't pass the state test, or not the state, but whatever praxis test. And it was because of exposure that was entry-level math that they had as freshmen that they were doing. And so when they were given a refresher course, they had 100% pass rate. So what Julie, what Ms. Powell's saying is very relevant in that teacher schedule.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something too to keep in mind, if you look at, I would venture to say that the science assessment now is more of an integrated science test,
It is.
whereas we
It
teach
is.
science. There is a lot of schools have an integrated science class, but it's usually biology, chemistry, physics. And when we did the end of course, it was at the end of biology.
That's right.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we, when we did end of course, didn't we do that in this one? Do we have a testing window for end of course for block?
I think it was at
scheduling?
just the end of the course.
The end of
We
just
did
at
offer
the end of the
something.
course.
Yeah, I think we
Whenever that
offered it
happened. Yeah.
as well in like the semester break, or in
Yeah.
your example
It became the
of being
final
on
exam.
prime
It was the
minister.
final exam, and it was like,
Right.
districts could go up to 10%.
Right, and you could use 10% on it.
Yeah.
And so when you look at science, even when you look at, certifications, you're not looking at an integrated approach of how it's being taught, except maybe for a 1 year of a class. And a lot of times that's in the freshman level class. And then they move into those specialties, if you will, biology and others. So that's some questions that we're looking at. Do we want to look at
A
it?
lot of this is exposing the kind of false promise of high stakes standardized assessment, in that if we're really assessing what students know and can do in science over a course of their learner experience, then, worrying about, do we test them fast enough? to get it out of their brains, really just reminds us of the
Right.
perverse nature of high stakes assessment and accountability anyway. So if we're talking about enduring long-term understanding of science and the ability to apply it, these tests are not the answer to our question. So I think that's part of the moonshot notion, that we've got to break away from the things that cause us to do bad practice over time to try to catch it as fast as we can.
Well, I think that's what goes back to yesterday's conversation. We got to tie these together. That's why science needs to be part of a local accountability, because there are so many other ways to measure our science ability versus a one state test at the end. So when the legislators or others are asking why, there's excellent examples of other things that we want to have in a local accountability for science versus one measurement of test. That way we won't start playing games, switch our schedule around for these and all that other play in there.
We have about 9 more minutes, ladies.
So we'll first turn to Kelly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Todd.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Todd.
I'm going to differ with some people, but I'm concerned. Did anybody else use this test that we are scoring 6% on any other state?
Oh, no, it's a custom test for Kentucky. And I think that brings up a lot of Dr. Poe's comments. It's a custom
It
test.
does require thinking. I guess my question is, how much professional development have the teachers had to work on that test and how to teach it? Because they're teaching kids how to think and not memorize. And it is a progression, and it's a deeper. Everybody you talk to, when they get scared of science, they hate reading problems. But guess what? Reading problems are where you're going to make a living. And I'm really upset a bit about putting all the blame on the way we test these kids when we don't have enough science teachers in the state to begin with, and we're not training the ones we have to teach the way that we're going to test. I would really like to see, there are some episodic things going on where some teachers are teaching the new way. I'd like to see what their test scores are compared to somebody in that same region with the same demographics that don't teach that way. I think that's required, because I think these kids can do better than what we're thinking of. I don't want to dumb down to them because we're not teaching their teachers. I heard a teacher say one time, I taught science for 23 years. I thought I was pretty good at it. But until I learned how to teach this way, I was failing them. I was giving them all the answers before they left the room. When I read the Perkins information yesterday, I went back there. We passed it on consent. I didn't bring it up. There's a ton of money being spent in CTE to retain teachers, to prepare teachers, to keep teachers in the pipeline. I'm not sure we got that kind of money in science and math at all.
We don't.
But we talk about it. And I don't know what I want to say about all of that, but there'll be some percentage of the money going into CTE, going into math and science education. Because we are, I'll say it one more time, and talk with economic development people, we're training a lot of people who can put other people's ideas together. We're not challenging the kids with a teaching technique that makes them think so that they can have their own ideas, create their own businesses, and do things. So it's not, but I would like to see, is there some teachers who had training, what their test scores show?
Okay.
And compare those to others where the teachers are sitting there doing what they've always done. These standards have been out for 4 years, haven't they? Or longer?
Longer.
And I don't think, you look at the literacy, we've done a tremendous job in putting out money for literacy. We've got the math initiative that's going on now. We've done math. Really haven't paid much attention to science. And you can say it's more difficult, and it is. And if we don't think we can compete at it, let's just kind of not compete at it. But I'd really like to see what we're doing to change it so that we can move the scores up, because it is 6% is 6%. I don't care. So I can't lay it all. The teachers are great. They're trying. But I just don't think they've had the professional development that they need to be able to teach. That test is written clearly, going through the progression to take a kid that starts early and thinks all the way through to 12th grade. And it's pretty interesting stuff. It is more challenging, but that's my I think you would expect me to say something like this. And, but I would like to see some data on places
We'll
that
see
are,
if we.
that
I
have been
think that
trained.
speaks to a really practical research agenda that aligns well with what we're talking about in United We Learn, and something that, Humro or one of our research partners can
Sure.
probably
We'll
help
just
us
need to
dig
identify the
into.
kid. We need to identify.
But I
the
also want to
teachers.
encourage you, Dr. Todd, in that what I see in these redesign efforts, help us find that spot where we're not just blaming the test, nor are we blaming the kids, nor are we blaming the teachers, but instead we're trying to bring those things together. Better teacher preparation around science, better engagement on the part of kids around science, and then a test that better reflects what's happening in the instructional model. Can't remember the researcher who talked about the instructional core, but that notion is what you're talking about there too. This is not trying to get out of responsibility or accountability, but how do we bring those things together in a redesign in such a way that all of those efforts are appropriately reported out?
I hear a whole lot more talk about changing the assessment than changing the teaching.
Well, yeah, right. And I think that would be an unintended message from us, because I do think it is about the assessment catching up with the instructional design and both of them getting better as we engage kids in it. So I think that's an important notion as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate those remarks.
Okay.
So Kelly.
All right, next slide. Next slide, please. I only have one slide, and that way we'll give Mickey some time to really do a deep dive into the standards. But I did want to give an update in the school improvement world with the release of the test data in October. You'll remember that Senate Bill 1 of 2020 no longer allows us to identify CSI schools each testing cycle. So no CSI schools were identified in the fall of 2024. We did have 8 schools that exited CSI status this fall. So congratulations to those schools. We also had 84 schools that came out of the TSI category. Just as a reminder, the CSI school is a school that's performing in the bottom 5% of all schools across the state by elementary level, middle level, or high school level. And then a TSI school is a school that has a subgroup performing as poorly as the bottom 5% of schools. And then we are still providing support to our CSI schools across the state. We currently have 20 CSI schools. And then we also have a wide variety of supports going out to our TSI schools across the state this year. So that's just a little update around CSI, TSI, and the school improvement efforts. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions for Dr. Foster? All right, thank you. Mickey.
All right, wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to hit on sort of this combination of what Vice Chair Young has mentioned and also Dr. Todd. We are looking primarily as our primary mission at increasing access to high quality grade level learning, vibrant, meaningful, relevant experiences for students across the state. But in doing so, we know we must provide professional development support for teachers. It has to be in combination so that they are better equipped and well supported in ensuring that students are having those vibrant experiences that are aligned to standards and that they're able to learn ways to demonstrate the knowledge and the skills and the competencies that they've developed over the course of their educational programming. You can see there, I'm only going to speak to this briefly, but there's this notion of promoting high quality resources, and that is for the benefit of both the teacher and the student. We want to make sure that while the teacher, obviously that person is the most important in terms of the learning that's happening for students, but teachers deserve access to resources that they know are evidence-based and that they can have assurance are not only aligned to our standards, but that demonstrate grade level learning for students within that particular content area at that grade level. So on the next slide, I'm going to hit some of the different content areas, and I am in no way going to be able to mention everything here. And so I welcome any questions as follow-up. Happy to have conversations or email if there are certain things that I don't get to speak to that you have questions about. I'm going to focus on sort of new moves since I have last been able to speak with you. So for the reading and writing space specifically, I want to elevate the third bullet there under professional learning. So we have established, along with the Division of Early Literacy, Christy Biggerstaff is leading that work, a Kentucky Early Literacy Leadership Network. And I am thrilled to say we have 33 districts who are opting into that network. And it's about supporting them. There are district leaders, building administrators, teacher leaders, coaches who are engaging in that network. And we are listening to them. So there is an advisory cabinet where they are bringing forth the needs that they have around the Read to Succeed Act implementation, evidence-based instruction for literacy, and we're able to provide more technical assistance and support as a part of that network. So we're very excited that has developed, and then we've had the inaugural year for that work. The other thing I wanted to mention, just under additional supports, there's been so much conversation in recent days, and we know this, about the significance of the building administrator and ensuring that that leader is well versed in the work that's happening among teachers, for students across their buildings. So we have curated, in addition to the 23 school-based coaches, currently 3 regional principal supports leaders. And those leaders are mentoring, coaching the principals specifically who are a part of the Kentucky Early Literacy Leadership Network, but they're also working with the building administrators in the partner schools where our literacy coaches reside. So we feel like that will help with sustainability, with scaling the work across their buildings, and are just very grateful that that position is in existence, and we actually have that open right now. So if you know of quality principals who are looking to serve in more of a coaching, mentoring role for other leaders across our state, please encourage them to consider that position. On the next slide, I'm going to shift a little bit to mathematics now. And as you all know, you were able to meet her in August at the board meeting. Dr. Jennifer Fraley has come on board as our Director of Mathematics Education. And in that second column, we are building out professional learning supports for teachers in the area of mathematics. And this is due to our Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act. Certainly want to thank the support from the legislature, not only in the act itself, but in the appropriation that was granted. So that was $5 million. To Dr. Todd's point, it's not really comparable to what we have for literacy at the moment, but I'm very grateful that we have been able to invest more in the professional learning supports for teachers in the area of mathematics specifically. And then I want to give a nod to our Mathematics Achievement Fund coaching grant. So we have been able to expand that grant from 11 schools to now a total of 51 schools. And that's about empowering local mathematics coaches. So unlike our literacy model where we are sort of taking some high flyers from districts, this is investing in local math coaches to support buildings across their own districts. So just very excited about that. You'll see there we have a new grant opportunity around the adoption of high quality instructional resources and the associated professional learning for math, and that will open in January of 2025. So all of those advancements are a result of the Numeracy Counts Act and the funding that we received in association with that. On the next slide, going to shift to science, and I want to begin by just thanking Board Member Woods for her kind words about our science consultants. It is an understatement for me to say that they care deeply about the needs of students and teachers. They are working so hard. They've developed asynchronous modules. They are doing synchronous workshops, in-person workshops across the state. All of that is recorded so that those webinars can be released and benefit additional teachers. They're providing technical assistance based on questions that we receive from the field. And I am confident that their work in partnership with organizations like PIMSR, who are doing great work across the state to elevate leadership networks and to really make it come to life for a teacher. Now, you can break down a standard, You can align a task to the standards, but if you don't get an opportunity to really experience and see what standards aligned instruction looks like, it is a struggle. And that we have several teachers who are in some ways on an island. They're the singular science teacher for that grade level. And so we want to make sure that we're encouraging community, that we are elevating the bright spots. And Dr. Todd, you've inspired me to work with Rhonda, because we do know of some of those teachers that have had an investment in that professional learning and did in fact see wonderful outcomes on the science test. And so there is so much work moving in this space, and I'm frankly quite encouraged by all that we do have going on. And so if we can find a way to ensure that the assessment is aligned in a sense to what is happening in classrooms and allow students to truly demonstrate the scientific knowledge and reasoning that they have, we will absolutely be moving in the right direction.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. You definitely ended us on a high note, Mickey. Thank you so much. Lee, I think that really helped. You inspired Mickey, you inspired all of us in this conversation, but then to get to this point where we can see those come together, the gestalt of that around support for teachers and the process, I think is really important. Mickey, I love seeing on slide 18, the partnerships on the right-hand side. In the interest of time, I know you went quickly through that slide, but that's also really, really powerful. We're seeing it already taking root in literacy, more now in math even, and then if we extend beyond PIMSR as a professional partnership in science, I think about Kentucky Science and Technology Center, a lot of folks out there who could, jump in and support this work as well. I think that's in keeping with the deep community engagement that we talk about in Kentucky United. We learn a lot too. Dr. Pope.
I'm sorry.
No apologies.
We don't get the opportunity you get more opportunity to talk with these individuals than we do. So making my follow-up question of all the great work that we're doing goes back to my question. We pass literacy assessments and we pass mathematic assessments. Tell me how that's tying into United We Learn then and our other assessments, because I'm kind of a little bit confused as, okay, that we're measuring these separately, but how does that blend into United We Learn and our prototype that the commissioner is going to be talking about to a group on Sunday?
Absolutely. And others, please feel free to join in. But so for reading and math specifically, we know that there are federal requirements that will stay in place. And Dr. Poe, I think that one of the things we are looking to see based on our investment in literacy and what we are doing in mathematics, it does take some time. So it takes about 3 to 5 years to really see some changes in test scores based on the professional learning that the teacher has, and then the students being able to benefit from that over a course of years when they are ultimately tested. But what I'm excited about is that with that local accountability measure, districts will also be able to lift forward the other great work that's happening in the space of literacy, mathematics, and other content areas. And so I think that we'll start to see that the picture will become clearer. We'll have greater clarity on what is working for students. And we also have really tried to support professional learning around the instructional resources that have been adopted. So both pieces of legislation had requirements for adoption dates at different times around aligned resources. And again, that's really the floor, but the benefit of that is that those educators can be assured that those students are having access to standards aligned grade level learning. And so with those resources, with the development of deeper learning and vibrant experiences, I think in time, that's what we want. We want to see increased outcomes and increased success for students in all of these content areas.
Yeah, so is there like a separate, I guess my question, is there like a separate mechanism that's in that legislation that is different from our state accountability? I remember in the legislation when you were testifying in the group or something.
So there are. So we do have the universal screening and diagnostic requirements now in law, and that sort of connects to the notion of through course assessments that have been a part of the accountability model. But so those are in place for reading and writing currently. And I said writing, but really it's the literacy side of it, just the reading component. And then Dr. Fraley has just closed the submission period for vendors to provide the universal screener and diagnostics for mathematics. And if I'm remembering this correctly, I believe she told me there were 12 vendor submissions. So the review team will be going through the process of determining the approved list for screening and diagnostics. But we know that as we move forward with the assessment model, some of that might change as a result of what is ultimately determined.
Yeah, that's what I'm just having my trouble wrapping around this legislation here and then accountability and assessment there. And if they're taking this work and it's going to flow into some part of the accountability, or is it just separate work sitting over here and accountability sitting over here?
I think it's separate, at least for
Well,
now.
that's-
For
well,
now, it's separate. Yeah.
That's how I'm seeing it, but I see that then as disjointed is what I'm saying. Somehow, if we're testing literacy and assessment this way over here, we should be testing it somewhat the same over here. And if we were doing through course assessments, we're saying this ties all in here, but this is still sitting out here separately. That's all. And how does, I guess that's my thing. How does that then flow into Rhonda's department? Eventually, I would hope that that material would be aligned into their assessment.
Like the
Some-
conversation of the through course, and maybe the third one is the summative piece.
Yeah. right.
Or good feedback for the design.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But really the standards should be the core that would.
They
make
should be
that
the
whole
link.
thing.
The standards should be the link.
Because
state
if
standards.
I'm trying to go back in that role, I'm sitting there as a teacher or as a principal in that role. Because you got the through course assessments that we're developing. It sounds like that's what we're going to go to somewhere. So I'm going to be doing this, and then I'm going to be doing this. So how, eventually I want this to be this in that through course assessment written into whoever's going to get through course assessments would have these assessments written into them that it's all one design.
Yeah.
Am I making
Yes, no,
sense?
you're right.
Because
You're
otherwise
kinda-
I'm that
Is
teacher.
there a way to sort of streamline?
Yeah,
the effort
because
and
otherwise
have it
we've
serve
got
multiple
another
purposes?
assessment and then
Right.
through course assessments, we're taking more assessments instead of less assessments, which we were trying to do.
Right.
So, and then I'm that third grade or fourth grade, whatever grade level it is, I'm going to be worried on this assessment a little bit more right now than this assessment because this is assessing directly what I'm doing, on those standards in the teaching. And then this is a separate thing. So I'm going back to Preston's thing. Which one do I focus on as a teacher? In this case, as a teacher, do I focus more on this or do I focus more on this through course assessment?
And I think the power of the through course assessment is that I could immediately respond instructionally to the needs of the students in my class right now.
Correct. But so is the test that you're designing for the KRS or whatever. That's supposed to be that way too. I'm looking at the design and how I'm doing, and I should be changing my teaching in relationship to that. No different than the through course assessments. I mean,
Again, that's the goal is like, for example, we're looking at other states and how they look at their standards as the core part of that through course assessment, but also if there's some adaptability with other questions that are added in. And for that type of through course assessment to replace some of that, or to replace what districts are doing now with their interim assessments.
Right.
So again, to have that alignment, that's the goal, because we don't want to say we want it to be something that's very meaningful and useful, that it changes instruction the next day. So that's the goal. We don't want them to be looking at two different areas. So the other things too, as we talk about is, do we have a suggested pacing guide as part of the new assessment? It's hard to say we'd mandate a pacing guide, but would we need that? So there's a lot of questions as we move forward.
I'm just hoping that those two are talking.
We
Well, I know they.
Oh yeah.
I know they.
Oh,
talk.
absolutely.
Spending the afternoon and early evening together tonight.
truly,
Well, this
Fine,
conference.
because I think that the legislation created additional tasks for us.
It did.
Okay. And I think it's not you all, but you got the legislature mandating this and they're mandating this. And we need to go back to them and say, these two need to be like this. Because right now they're two separate things. Just my observation.
Thank you. All right, another great day of learning, really important conversation. Thanks for your leadership on this work and for the collaboration around improvement of teaching and learning across Kentucky, which I think was the title of the session. So thank you. The last item on our agenda for today is the presentation of the Kevin M. Noland and Mary Ann Miller Award for Outstanding Public Service to Kentucky Schools. I'll turn it over to Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Vice Chair Young. I appreciate that. And this is an opportunity, very thankful for this opportunity to present an award to a very deserving person here. The Kevin M. Noland Mary Ann Miller Award recognizes a Kentucky Department of Education employee for significant service to Kentucky's public schools and providing inspiration for education. This year's recipient is a real asset to our agency, but more importantly, to all the students, families, and educators across the Commonwealth. I'm going to announce the winner shortly, but I have a lot of great things to say, not only about her, but also about the award itself. So bear with me just for a few minutes. Believe me, you want to hear all of this. Our recipient, Amy Patterson, a systems consultant, IT and IDA Part B data manager in KDE's Office of Special Education and Early Learning, is the recipient of the 2024 Kevin M. Noland Mary Ann Miller Award. The award is named for Kevin M. Noland, who served as KDE's Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel and as Interim Commissioner on 4 occasions. So, Todd, there's some aspirations there. Hopefully in another 8 years, but with that being said. And Mary Ann Miller, who served KDE as a program consultant, staff assistant, policy advisor, director of KBE, and chief of staff. Very deserving of this award, Amy has continually dedicated herself to service, innovation, and leadership, and her significant impact on data quality and educational advancement extends from Kentucky to a national level, where she has emerged as a respected leader in the field of special education data management. Amy has been with KDE for 16 years, starting the Office of Teaching and Learning to provide support to Kentucky's districts in the Division of Learning Supports, managing initiatives such as individualized learning plans, ACT college readiness transition courses, and graduation requirements. Her versatility also allowed her to serve as a math consultant and later, briefly, in the Career and Technical Education Division. Since becoming OCL's IDEA data manager in 2015, she has been essential in building efficient and effective data processes that strengthen OCL's support of local special education. Each year, she conducts beginning of the year and end of the year trainings, equipping district administrators and school personnel with the skills and resources they need for accurate, timely data management. She also works closely with the OCL team and national technical assistance providers to ensure Kentucky upholds the high standards in data quality and accessibility. Her contributions were recognized during Kentucky's recent differentiated monitoring and support visit from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. Amy also ensures local directors of special education are supported with an up-to-date, step-by-step data manual, making complex reporting processes clear and manageable. In 2021, she was elected chair of the National Association for State Directors of Special Education's Special Education Data Manager Affinity Group and led IDEA Part B data managers for all the nation's states and entities. As Kentucky's IDEA data manager, Amy leads Kentucky's efforts in collecting, validating, and submitting special education data to the U.S. Department of Education, ensuring data quality and integrity that ultimately enhance educational opportunities for students with disabilities. Amy embodies everything it means to be a servant leader. She is all in when it comes to ensuring there's necessary support and resources to provide the best possible opportunities for student success across the Commonwealth. Established in 2013 to recognize Noland's 18 years of service, the KBE added Miller's name to the award in 2017 to honor her 30 years of service to KDE. A selection committee made up of a cross-section of KDE employees reviewed and rated this year's nominations, which were submitted by KDE staff. So to be nominated and selected by your peers is an honor. So much of an honor. Today, we are proud to recognize Amy Patterson as the 2024 Kevin N. Noland Mary Ann Miller Award. So at this time, if Ms. Patterson, if you'd like to make some comments, happy to do so.
You get the hot seat now.
Yes, thank you so much. I am in shock. I just, I work with a great group of people, both at KDE and OCL and within the districts, and they are very supportive. And I so appreciate the support that I get from everyone. This is a great place to work. I love it. I've been here 16 years and it's always been great. So I thank you for everything. Congratulations.
I think we also have Ed Miller, the audience with us too. If you wouldn't mind to come forward, we can take some pictures if you wouldn't mind. Thank you, sir, for being here with us. That is Mary Miller's husband. And where would be great? Right in the middle. If you could come up here.
Thank you so much. I like watching Greg a lot.
Oh, sorry.
Just trying to get out of the beam. I know.
Photo about Randy, photo about. Oh, wait. That's good.
Yeah, we're great.
He's got it.
I don't want to be.
I
I thought it was the computer cord.
So, you're on
The first.
That's why I didn't want to move it off. I didn't know where it was.
It's like stepping on a landmine or something.
Stay still.
Thanks to
Wow.
credit. Nice. This is my son, Jim. Hi, guys. I've been down in Miller and Chris Thacker. I've worked with Carla since the day I started here. And this is
Thank you very much. And it's a great honor to meet you. Mary Ann was started out as a special education major and that is for the first few years. There seemed to be real is knowing somebody's gleaming data with special education. Oh, for sure.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Take a photo of you with everybody. Amazing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know. She's right here. We need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not done yet, Lou. You got to sure.
She hasn't adjourned the meeting.
No, that's what. Can you unplug me over there, please?
That's my side.
There you go.
I think we may be out.
No, disagree with you on some of this. I miss the county teachers. No, I teach this stuff.
No, I understood you guys said what you're saying.
Teachers, yeah.
Get a motion to adjourn
I make that motion.
and second.
It's just like
So
that.
moved.
It's when you said that.
Aye.
Thanks.